Stories of Futures Past presents 5 stories featuring True Love. Volume 2. Moonlight and Robots by Jerry Dunham. The Very Black by Dean Evans. Boy Meets Dyevitza by Robert F. Young. The Oddly Elusive Brunette by John Victor Peterson. And Devious, The Line of Duty by Tom Godwin. Moonlight and Robots by Jerry Dunham. Originally published in Imagination Stories of Science and Fantasy, May 1955. Narrated by Tom Trussel. Thad Morgan looked around his little room. The 2 deactivated robots and the framework that suspended the limp suit hardly left room for him to move around. At the moment, he felt mildly disgusted with this whole convention. He asked himself why engagements and marriages had to be surrounded with tradition and ridiculous games. But of course, he had to go through with it. Myrna seemed to have been filled with excitement when they were discussing the final plans for the ceremony. He might as well get started. He glanced at the clock. It was almost 8. He picked up the book of rules and looked at it again. He reread the instructions for operating the mechanism. First it said, "Inspect the facsimile and see that it is well groomed and entirely in order." He looked at the 2 lifeless twins of himself. Yes, they looked all right. He decided which one he would use tonight. Then he read, he was to get into the suit. The book called it a harness. Activate the selected facsimile and set the controls. It went on to say that every movement he made would be duplicated by the robot. Everything the facsimile experienced would be transmitted to the harness, becoming his experiences. Well, he had practiced all that since renting the thing 3 days ago. He turned toward the marriage game rules. The rules dictated 7 situations. That would mean, in his case, 7 evenings for Myrna and him to decide whether they were meeting each other's robots or their real selves. The book pointed out that the primary or real body had to be used at least once in the first 5 situations. The first contestant to correctly identify the other's real body won the game, and the contest was over. The winner received commendation and was supposed to be the dominant spouse. Of course, the last was mere convention. However, the most important, the most rigid, and to Thad the most fantastic rule in the whole contest was that if the girl won, the couple was required to wait a year before completing the marriage ceremony. That seemed a weightier matter to Morgan. He read on. The first contestant who correctly identified the other as a facsimile won a point. If he failed, the other contestant had the opportunity to make an identification. The situation ended when one contestant made a correct identification or when both failed. Laying the book down, he decided he'd better get started because it was getting late. He climbed into the harness and hung in mid-air, suspended by his belt. He activated one of his facsimiles and turned his head so he could see himself through the robot's eyes. Thumbing his nose, he watched the creature hanging in the harness do likewise. It gave him an eerie feeling. Even though he knew he was walking in thin air and getting nowhere, it really seemed as if he could feel the floor under his feet and see the room move around him in a very ordinary fashion. As soon as his facsimile left the room, his mind made the adjustment, and it was as if he were really he strolling nonchalantly down the corridor. He drove to a florist's shop and started to purchase a corsage. Abashed, he caught himself. He rushed out of the shop and went home to put a wallet and handkerchief into his pockets. He would have to be more careful, he realized. Slips like that might cost him the contest. With corsage box in hand, he pressed the doorbell and waited. He hoped his plastic flesh was moulded perfectly. It looked all right to him, but he never could tell what someone else might notice. Myrna opened the door. She was lovely, and he took her in his arms. Drawing back, he looked at her dubiously. At least, he thought it was she. His family, her family, and 2 or 3 others acting as judges and referees in the contest stood in the living room watching them. They began to laugh as they saw his questioning look. It really was rather funny, he decided. Myrna led him into the room and introduced him to the few he didn't know. He watched her closely as she opened the box. He thought her fingers were fumbling a bit. Everyone in the room watched the 2 of them intently. They didn't know whether the couple were real or robot either. At any moment, she might suddenly try to identify him. Maybe he should take the first chance. She might be fumbling from nervousness, he realized. If it were really she and he called her a robot, she might be offended. Girls were like that, but of course, he would have to take that chance. "You're a robot," he announced suddenly. Myrna looked surprised. "Oh, how did you know?" She was crestfallen. He was congratulated as they all trooped upstairs to help Myrna out of her harness. Later, it was nice to know for sure that it was really her living flesh in his arms. Then he felt guilty, as he realized she was not in his living arms. He excused himself hurriedly and returned home. The next evening he was invited to Myrna's home for dinner. He thought of actually going himself because he knew the food would be good. The apparatus could transmit heat, cold, and pressure, but it didn't do much when it came to taste, and it couldn't make any sensation in one's interior. But he decided it would be too risky. If she identified his facsimile, she would win a point to be sure, but if she identified his real self, well, that would end the contest, and he would have to wait a year and get married. He would have to be careful of the food, though. She might try to trick him with something that looked good but tasted terrible, and his facsimile would eat it just the same. That night, before sending his proxy to Myrna's dinner party, he had his facsimile stick himself with a pin. The sharp pain made him wince. He wondered about the mechanics of the machine. He supposed that his pain was caused by a tiny electrical shock that stimulated a pain nerve. He realized that the more he could find out about his equipment, the better his chances were of winning. That evening, Myrna was very watchful and very cool. He wondered if she suspected that she had been loved by a robot the evening before. He had hardly seated himself at the table when she called him a robot. The family seemed uproariously amused. He wondered how she had known. He congratulated her politely, and she was allowed to go unidentified since it was her round. When his facsimile was brought back to the room, Thad climbed wearily out of his harness and made himself a cold, uninteresting supper. He felt lonely. Was Myrna really sore at him? Damn this whole business. He wished he didn't have to go through all of this. The next evening, he had a plan worked out. He went himself and greeted her at the door, slammed it shut, and bent towards her to listen. It would take a moment for the reverberation to reach her room. If she were a robot, the sound would come through the primary microphone in the sender, and he might be able to hear the faint echo from her lips. He did, and he immediately announced her as a facsimile. Her congratulations were hardly more than civil. He left with no great feeling of triumph. The next 3 evenings she was very distant. He understood why she didn't meet him at the door anymore, but he couldn't tell why the rest of her behavior was so cold. She was very lucky, too. She identified him correctly as a robot each time before he even had time to greet the rest of the family. The day went very slowly. Thad left the office early in his uneasiness. Tonight was the 7th and last situation. He hoped it also wouldn't be their last evening together. At this point, he hardly knew what to do. If she won the contest, it would be a whole long year before they could marry. He knew that quite often that spelled the finish to a romance. On the other hand, if he won, it might estrange them immediately. She had such pride. What to do? He decided to forget the robots and go as his real self again. Points were in her favour anyway. He realized that if she were present by facsimile, he couldn't possibly win. He might as well be the first one to guess and be done with it. It wasn't the contest that mattered anyhow. It was Myrna and what she was feeling. When he rang the doorbell that evening, the corsage box under his arm contained orchids. Unexpectedly, it was Myrna that opened the door. "Hello, real Myrna." She hesitated for a moment. "Good evening, Thad. Please come in." He followed her in and greeted the family. She opened the box, and for a moment she seemed impressed. Then she regained her composure. He accepted her formal thanks as the families milled around admiring the gift. Everyone seemed slightly restrained. Thad finally phrased the question that they were all thinking. "Are you real? Perhaps you could tell that if you kissed me," she said with mocking sweetness. "Myrna, I'm sorry about that first evening, but I forgot that I wasn't really there." He wished the family wasn't there so close. All of them watching and listening made him feel an even greater uneasiness. Oh, he thought, the hell with this contest. "Myrna, honey, look, I don't care if it's really you or not. Well, that is, I mean—" His voice faded out. He realized he was getting more confused. Someone snickered. Myrna was watching him with a contemptuous smile curving her lips. The whole thing suddenly made him mad. "Okay, I don't care who wins the contest. I don't care if we do have to wait a year. I don't even care at the moment if there's going to be a wedding or not." He started out of the room, dimly aware that he was angrier than he realized. Myrna caught him in the vestibule. Thad, wait, please. I know I was being spiteful. You won the contest. I'm really me. Please don't go like this. I'd never forgive myself." She looked up at him tearfully. He felt himself relenting finally, and smiled. She threw her arms around his neck, and he drew her close. After a very long kiss, she looked up at him and said softly, "Thad, let's be sure the robots are all sent back to the agency before our honeymoon." The end. Subscribe for your daily stories of futures past. And now, for the next story. The Very Black by Dean Evans. Originally published in Fantastic Universe, August-September 1953. Narrated by Tom Trussel. There was nothing peculiar about that certain night, I suppose, except to me personally. A little earlier in the evening I'd walked out on the doll, Margie Hayman, and a man doesn't do that and cheer over it. Not if he's in love with a doll, he doesn't. Not this doll. If you've ever seen her, you'll give the nod on that. The trouble had been Air Force's new triangular ship, the new Saucer. Not radio-controlled, this one. This one was to carry a real live pilot. At least, that's what the doll's father, who was chief engineer at Airtech Incorporated, had in mind when he designed it. The doll had said to me sort of casually, "Got something, baby?" She called me baby. Me, 185 in goose pimples. "Toss it over, doll," I said. "No strings on you, baby." She'd grinned that little one-sided grin of hers. "No strings on you, not even one. You're a flyboy, you are, and you can take off or land any time, any place you feel like it." "Stake your mum's Charleston cap on that," I said. She nodded. Her one-sided grin seemed to fade slightly, but she hooked it up again fast. A doll, like I said. This was the original model. They'd never gone into production on girls like her full-time. She said, "Therefore, I've got no right to go stalking with a salt shaker in one hand and a pair of shears for your tail feathers in the other." "You're cute, doll," I said, still going along with her 100%. "Nice. We get along nice." Somebody ought to set him up on that. "So far?" "Huh?" I blinked. I hate sour notes. That's why I'm not a musician. You never get a sour note in a jet job, or if you do, you don't get annoyed. That's the sour note to end all sour notes. "Brace yourself, baby," she said. I took a hitch on the highball glass I was holding and let one eye get a serious look in it. "Shoot," I told her. "This new job, this new saucer the TV newscasts are blatting about. You boys in the Air Force heard about it yet?" "There's been a rumor," I said. I frowned. "Top secret, in a pig's eyelash." "Uh-huh. Is it true this particular ship is supposed to carry a pilot this time?" "Where do they dig up all this old stuff?" I growled. "Hell, I knew all about that way, way back this afternoon already." "Uh-huh. Is it also true they've asked a flyboy named Eddie Anders to take it up the first time? This flyboy named Eddie Anders being my baby?" I got bored with the highball. I tossed it down the hole in my head and put the glass on a table. "You're psychic," I said. She shrugged. "Good-looking, maybe. Nice shape, maybe. Peachy disposition, maybe. Psychic, But who else would they ask to do it?" "A point," I conceded. "Fork in the road coming up," the doll said. "Huh?" "Fork. Look, it'll be voluntary, won't it? You don't have to do it. They won't think the worse of you if you refuse." "Huh?" I gawked at her. "I'm scared, baby." Her eyes weren't blue anymore. They'd been blue before, but not now. Now they were violet balls that were laying me like somebody taking a last long look at the thing down inside the nice white satin before they closed the cover on it for the final time. "Have a drink, doll," I said. I got up, went to the liquor wagon. "Seltzer? There isn't any mixer left." "Asked you something, baby." I took her glass over. I handed it to her. My own drink I poured down that same hole in my head. I said finally, "Nice smooth bourbon, but I like Scotch better." "They've already crashed 4 of this new type on tests, haven't they?" I nearly choked. That was supposed to be the very pinnacle of the top secret stuff. But she was right, of course. 4 of the earlier models had cracked up. No pilots in them at the time, radio-controlled, but jobs designed to carry pilots nevertheless. "Some pictures have great big ugly-looking ears," I said. She didn't seem to mind. She said, "Or maybe I'm really psychic, as you said. Or maybe my dad's being chief at AirTech has something to do with it." "Somebody ought to stitch a zipper across his big fat yap," I said, "and weld the damn thing shut." "He told only me," she said softly, "and then only because of you. You see, baby, he isn't like us. He's got old-fashioned notions you and I've got strings tied around each other already, just because you gave me a ring. I stared at her. "Crazy, isn't it? He isn't sensible like us." "Can the gag lines, doll," I said sourly. "The old bird's okay." And that fetched a few moments of silence in the room. Thick, pervading silence. A silence to be broken at any fractional second, and heavy, supercharged because of it. I said finally, "Somebody has to take it up. It might as well be me. And they've already asked me." "You could refuse, baby." "Sure I could. It's voluntary. They don't horsewhip a guy into it." "Uh-huh. Voluntary. And you can refuse." She stopped, waited, then, "Making me get right down there on the hard bare floor on both knees, baby. All right? None of us should be proud. None of us has a right to be proud, have we? All right, baby. I'm down there, way, way down there. I'm asking you not to take that ship up. I'm begging you. Begging, baby. Look, on me you've never seen anything like this before. Begging." I looked at my empty glass. The taste in my mouth was suddenly bitter. "No strings, we said," I said harshly. "A flyboy, we said. Guy who can take off and land anywhere, anytime he likes. Stuff like that we just got through saying." She didn't answer that. I waited. She didn't answer. I got up finally, got my lousy new officer's cap off the TV set, and went over to the door. I opened the door. I went on through. But before I closed it, I heard her whisper. That's the trouble with whispers. They go incredible distances to get places. The whisper said, "That's right, baby. Right as rain. No strings. Ever." When you don't have any scotch in the house, you'd be surprised how well rum will do. Even Jamaica rum. I was on my own Davenport in my own apartment, and there were 2 shot glasses in front of me. I was taking turns on them so they wouldn't wear out. And what was keeping these glasses busy was me and a 5th of the Jamaica rum in my right hand. And that's when it all began. Across the room, a rather stout woman was needling a classic through the television screen, and at the same time needing a shave rather badly. I wasn't paying any attention to her. I was thinking about the doll, wondering, worrying a little. And that's when it began. That's when the voice said, "Mr. Anders, would you do me the goodness to forget that bottle for a moment?" The voice seemed to be coming from the TV screen, although the stout lady hadn't finished her song. The voice was like the disappointed sigh of a poor old bloke down to his last beer dime, and having to look up into the bartender's grinning puss as the bartender downs a nice bubbly glass of champagne somebody bought for him. Poor guy, I thought. I downed glass number 1, and then glass number 2, and then I looked over at the TV screen. That sent a little shiver up my spine. I dropped my eyes to the glasses, filled them once more. Strong stuff, Jamaica rum. At the first, the taste is medicine. A little later, the taste is pleasant syrup. And a little later still, the taste is delightful. But strong. The whole way strong. I downed glass number 1. I figured I wouldn't touch glass number 2 yet. I brought up my eyes, let them go over to the TV screen again. He didn't have any eyes. That was the first thing that struck me. There were other things, of course, such as the fact he didn't have any arms or legs. He didn't have any head either, in case he had eyes in the first place. He was a black, swirling, bioplastic mass of something or other, and he was doing a graceful tango directly in front of the TV screen, thereby blocking off from view the stout woman who needed a shave. He said, "Do you have any idea what I am, Mr. Anders?" "Sure," I said. "Somebody's blenorial nightmare." Incorrect, Mr. Anders. This substance is not mucus. Mucus is very seldom black. Mucus is very seldom black, I mimicked. Correct, Mr. Anders. So all right. So they were making Jamaica rum a little stronger these days. So all right. Next time I wouldn't get rum, I'd get Scotch. Hell with rum. I dismissed the thought from my mind. I picked up glass number 2, downed it. I wondered if the doll was feeling sorry for herself. Incorrect, Mr. Anders, he said. The rum is no stronger than usual. I jerked. I stared at the black, sticky-looking thing he was. I shut my eyes tightly, snapped them open again. Then I worked the glasses again with the bottle. Don't be shocked, Mr. Anders. I'm not a mind reader. It's just that you discarded the thought of a moment ago. I picked it up, see? Sure, I said. You picked it out of the junk pile of my mind, where all my little gems go. Correct, Mr. Anders. It was about time to empty the glasses again. I varied the routine this time by picking up number 2 glass first. Light a cigarette, Mr. Anders. I'm a guy to go along with a gag. I fished a cigarette out, lit it. Lit, I said. And just at that instant, the stout dame without the shave hit a sour one way up around A above high C. My ears cringed. I forgot the cigarette and glared across the room, trying to see through the black swirling mass that stood in front of the TV screen. Puff, Mr. Anders. I puffed. The puff sounded like somebody getting his lips on a very full glass of beer and quickly sucking so that foaming clouds don't go down the sides of the glass and all over the bar. I didn't have any cigarette. Ah! I blinked. The black swirling mass was going gently to and fro. At about head height on a man, my cigarette was sticking out from it, and a little curl of smoke was coming from the end. Even as I looked, the curl ceased, and then a big blue cloud of smoke barreled across the room toward my face. Your cigarette, Mr. Anders. Nice trick, I said. Took it out from between my lips, and I never felt it. Nice trick. Incorrect, Mr. Anders. When the singer flattened that particular note, your attention was diverted momentarily. Your senses are exceptional, you see. Your ears register pain at false sounds. Therefore, you discarded the thoughts of your cigarette during the moment you suffered with the singer. Following this reasoning, your cigarette went into abandonment, and I salvaged it. No trick at all, really. I thought, to hell with the shot glasses. I put the rum bottle to my lips and tilted it up and held it there until it wasn't good for anything any more. Then I took it down by the neck and heaved it straight at the black mass. The television screen didn't shatter, which proved something or other. The bottle didn't even reach the screen. It hit the black swirling mass about navel-high. It went in, sank in like slamming your fist into a fat man's stomach, and then it rebounded and clattered on the floor. "Scream!" I said thickly. "You dirty black delusion! Scream!" "I am screaming, Mr. Anders. That hurt terribly." He sort of unfolded then, like unfolding a limp wool sweater in the air, and from this unfolding something came forth that could have been somebody's old-fashioned idea of what a rifle looked like. He held it up in firing position, pointed at my head. "Don't be alarmed, Mr. Anders. This is to convince you. A gun. Yes, a very old gun. A Brown Bess, they used to call it. I just took it from the City Museum, where it was on display." He had a nice point-blank sight on my forehead. Now he moved the gun, aimed it off me, pointed it across the room toward the open windows. "Note the workmanship, Mr. Anders. Note the stock. Someone put a little effort on the carving. Note the sentiment carved here." The rum was working hard now. I could feel it climbing hand over hand up from my knees. "Let me read what it says, Mr. Anders. 'Death to ye colonies.' Note the odd wording, the spelling. And now watch, Mr. Anders." The gun came up a trifle, stiffened. There was a loud snapping sound, a click of metal on metal. Flintlock, as all the ancient guns were. And then came the roar. Wood across the room, the window casing, splintered and flew wildly. Smoke and smell filled my senses. He said, chuckling, "Let's call it the abandonment theory, for lack of a better name. This old brown Bess hasn't been thought of acquisitively for some years. It's been in the museum, abandoned, therefore subject to the discarded junk pile, as you yourself so cleverly put it before. Do I make myself clear, Mr. Anders?" "Perfectly, oh, perfectly, Mr. Bioplast." The rum was going around my eyes now, going up and around and headed like an arrow for the hunk of my brain that can't seem to hide fast enough. I guess I made it to the bedroom, but I wouldn't put any hard cash on it, and I guess I passed out. The morning was a bad one, as all bad ones usually are. But no matter how bad they get, there's always the consoling thought that in a few hours things will ease up. I hugged this thought through a needle shower, through 3 cups of coffee in the kitchen. What I was neglecting in this reasoning was the splintered wood in the living room. I saw it on my way out. It hit me starkly, like the blasted section of a eucalyptus trunk writhing up from the ground. I stopped dead in the doorway and stared at it. Then I got out my knife and got at it. I probed, but it was going to take more than a pocket knife. The ball, and it was just that, was buried a half-inch in the soft pine of the casing. I closed the knife and went to the phone and got information to ring the museum. "You people aren't missing a brown Bess musket," I said. It was a question, of course, but not now, not the way I had said it. "Nobody stole anything out of the museum last night, did they?" Sweat was oozing over my upper lip. I could feel it. I could feel sweat wetting the phone in my hand. The woman on the other end told me to wait. I said, "Yeah," not realizing. I waited, not realizing, until a man's voice came on. "You were saying something about a brown Bess musket, mister?" A cold, sharp voice. A gutter voice, but with the masking tag of official behind it. Like the voice of someone behind a desk writing something on a blotter. A real police voice. I put the phone down. I pulled all the shades in the living room, went out the door, locked it behind me, and drove as fast as you can make a Buick go, out to the field, but fast. The XXE1 was ready. She'd been ready for weeks. There wasn't a mechanical or electronic flaw in her. We hoped. I hoped. The man who designed her hoped. The doll's father, he hoped most of all. Even lying quiescent in her hangar, she looked as sleek as a Napoleon hat done in Port Monal. When your eyes went over her, you knew instinctively they'd thrown the Mach numbers out the window when she was done. I went through a door that had the simple word plotting on it. The doll's father was there already behind his desk, studying something as I came in. He looked up, smiled, said, "Hi, Guy." I flipped a finger at him. I wondered if the doll had told him about last night. "Wife and I were going to suggest a snack when we got home last night, but you had already gone, and Marge was in bed." I didn't look at him. "Left early, Pop. Growing boy." "Yeah, you look lousy, Guy." I put my teeth together. I still didn't look at him. "These nights," I said vaguely. "Sure." I could feel something in his voice. I took a breath and put my eyes on his. He said, "I'm a hell of an old duck." "Not so old, Pop." "Sure I am. but not too old to remember back to the days when I wasn't too old." There was a grave look in his eyes. I didn't have to answer that. The door banged open, and Melrose, the L.C., came in. He jerked a look at both of us, buttered a cigarette he'd just lit, lighted another, buttered that. He ran a hand through thick greying hair and frowned. "Anybody got a cigarette?" he said sourly. "Couldn't sleep last night. This damned responsibility. Worried all night about something we hadn't thought of." Pop looked up. Melrose went on. "Light. Travels in a straight line, no?" He blinked small nervous eyes at us. Then, "Can't go round corners unless it's helped, you see. I mean just this. The XXXC1 is expected to hit a significant fraction of the speed of light once it gets beyond the atmosphere. Now here's the point. How in hell do we control it then?" He waited. I didn't say anything. Pop didn't say anything. Melrose ran a hand through his hair once more, muttered "God damn it" to himself, turned around and went barging out the door. Pop said wryly, "Another quick memo to the Pentagon. He never heard of the Earth's gravity." "He's heard," I said. "It's just that it slipped his mind these last few years." Pop grinned. He handed me a sheaf of typewritten notes. "These'll just about make it. You'll notice the initial flight is charted pretty damn closely." "Thanks, Pop. I better take these somewhere else to look them over. Melrose might be back." "Pretty damn closely," he repeated. "Almost as closely as if she were going up under radio control." He stopped. He looked at me from under his eyebrows. I studied him. "Already told the brass I'd take her up, Pop." I kept my voice down. "Sure, Guy, sure. You mention it to Marge?" "Last night." "I see." His eyes got suddenly far away. I left him like that. Hell with him. Hell with the whole family. It was in the evening paper, tucked in the second section. They treated it lightly. It seemed the night watchman had opened the rear door of the museum for a breath of air, or maybe a smoke, or maybe to kitschy-coo some babe under the chin in the alley. That's the only way it could have happened. And he'd discovered the empty exhibit case at 2:10 in the morning. The case still had a little white card on it that told about the Brown Bess musket and the powder horn and the ball shot inside. But the little white card lied in its teeth. There weren't any such thing in the case at all, and he'd notified the curator at once. There was also a mention of a mysterious phone call which couldn't be traced. Things like this don't happen in 1953, so I didn't get loaded that night. I went home, went to the Davenport, sat down and told myself they don't happen. Things like this have never happened, will never happen. What occurred last night was something in the bottom of a bottle of Jamaica rum. "Thinking, Mr. Anders?" I took a slow breath. He was swaying gently in the air, a foot from my elbow, and he was still a black mucus scum, as he had been the night before. I got up. I said, "I'm not loaded tonight. I haven't had a thing all day." I took 2 steps toward him. He wasn't there. I took another breath, a very, very slow breath. I turned around and went back to the Davenport. He was back again. "They'll find that musket," he said. "I have no use for it now. You see, I wanted it only to convince you, Mr. Anders." I put my hands on my knees and didn't look at him. I was suddenly trying to remember where I'd put that Luger I'd brought home from Germany a couple years back. "You're not quite convinced yet, Mr. Anders." Where in the hell did I put it? "Very well, Mr. Anders. Now hear this, please. Now watch me." He stood at about hip height. A shelf-like section of the black mass protruded a little distance from the main part of him. On this shelf suddenly lay a rusted penknife. "A very little boy, Mr. Anders. and a very long while ago. A talented boy, one of those who has what might be called an exceptional imagination. This boy cherished a penknife when he was quite small. Pick up the knife, Mr. Anders. The knife was suddenly in my lap. I picked it up. It was rusty. It had a flat bone handle. Museums again, I whispered to myself. So highly did this boy prize his knife that he went to great pains to carve his name very, very carefully on one side of the bone handle. Turn the knife over, Mr. Anders. The name was Edward Anders. You lost it when you were 11. You wouldn't remember, though. I found it in an attic where it lay unnoticed. As the years went by, you gradually forgot about the knife, you see, and when your mind had completely abandoned the thoughts of it, it was mine. Had I wanted it? As a matter of fact, I didn't. I retrieved it just today. I put the knife down. Sweat was coming on my forehead now. I could feel it. I was remembering the knife, and what was scaring me even more was I was remembering the very day I had lost it, in the attic. I said very carefully, "All right, you've made your point. You can take it from there." "Quite so, Mr. Anders. You now admit I exist, that I have extraordinary powers. I am your own creation, Mr. Anders. As I said before, you have exceptional senses, including imagination. And yes, imagination is the greatest of all the senses. Some humans with this gift often imagine ludicrous things, exciting things, horrifying things, depending, don't you see, on mood, emotion. And the things these mortals imagine become real, are actually created, only they don't know it, of course." He stopped. He was probably giving me time to soak that up. Then he went on. "You've forgotten to keep trying to remember where you put that Luger, Mr. Anders. I just picked up the abandoned thought as it left your consciousness just now." I gulped down something that tried to rise in my throat. I didn't like this guy. "You created me when you were 14, Mr. Anders. You imagined me as a swashbuckling pirate. The only difference between me and the others who have been created in times past is that I have attained the 9th dimension. I am the first to do that. Also the first to capture the secrets of your own 3rd dimension. Naturally, then, it would be a pity for me to die." "Get out," I said. "Forgive me, Mr. Anders. My time is short. I die tomorrow." "That's swell. Now get out." "We're not immortal, you see. When our creators die, their imaginations die with them. We too die. It follows. But for some time I've had an idea." "Out," I said again. "Get the hell out of here." "You're going to die tomorrow, Mr. Anders, in that new flying saucer, and I must die with you. Except that I've had this idea. There are times when you look yourself in the eye and don't like what you see, or maybe what you see scares the living hell out of you. When those times come along, some little something inside tells you you'd better watch out. Then the doubts creep in. After that, the melancholy. And from that instant on, you aren't very sane any more." "Out!" I yelled. "Out! Out! Out! Get the hell out!" "One moment, Mr. Anders. Now as to this idea of mine. There's this woman, this Margie Hayman, this woman you call the doll." That one jerked me around. "Exactly. Now listen very carefully. You aren't entirely you anymore, Mr. Anders. I mean, you aren't the complete whole individual you as you once were. You love this woman. Something inside you has gone out and is now a part of her. Therefore, if you will just discard the thought of her some time between now and when you take that ship up, I can attach myself to her sentient being, don't you see, and thereby exist, at least partly, even though you yourself are dead. I pushed myself unsteadily to my feet. I stared at the entire black, repulsive, undulating mass before me. I took a step toward it. It isn't much to ask, Mr. Anders. You've quarrelled with her. You want no more of her. You've practically told her that. All I ask is that you finish the job. Forget her. Discard her. Throw her into the mental junk pile of abandonment. I didn't take any more steps. Something inside me was screaming, was ripping at my guts, was roaring with all the cacophony of all the giant discords of all eternity. Something inside my brain was sucking all my strength in one tremendous surging power dive of wish fulfillment. I was willing the black mucus mass of him out of my consciousness. He was no longer there. The only thing to prove he'd ever been there at all was a very old, very rusty penknife over on the table in front of the Davenport. The knife with my name carved on the bone handle. After that, I went unsteadily to the dresser in the living room. I got the doll's picture down off the dresser. I undressed. I took the picture to bed with me. The lights burned in my bedroom the entire night. Lieutenant Colonel Melrose looked weather-beaten. His greying hair was pulled here and there like a rag mop that's dried dirty, stiff. He had a freshly lit cigarette between his lips. He grinned nervously when he saw me, buttered the cigarette, said in a thin voice, "This is it, Anders. Ship goes up in 20 minutes. "I know," I said. He poked another cigarette at his lips. He said, "What?" in a startled tone. "Nothing," I said. "All right, I'll get ready." He lit the cigarette, took a puff that made the smoke do a frenetic dance around his nostrils. He jabbed it at an ashtray, bobbed his head in a convulsive movement, said, "Right-ho!" They strapped me in. Pop came to the open hatch. He stuck his head in, grinned, said, "Hi, Guy," softly. There was something in his eyes. The doll had told him how I hate sour notes. "How's the doll, Pop?" I forced myself to say it. "Swell, Ed. Just got a call from her. On her way out here to see you take off. Looks like she won't make it now, though." I didn't say anything. His eyes went down to the wallet I had propped up on my knees. The wallet was open, celluloid window showing. Inside the window was the doll's picture. "Tell her that, Pop," I said. "Yeah, Guy. Luck." They shut the hatch. There was no doubt about the takeoff. If one thing was perfected in the XXE-1, it was that. The ship rose like the mercury in a thermometer on a hot day in July. I took it slow to 50,000 feet. 50,000, I said into the throat mic. "Hear you, Anders," Melrose's voice. "Smooth," I said. "Radar on me?" "On you, Anders." I let the ship have a little head. This job used the clutch of a tax collector's claws for fuel. It just hooked itself on the nothing around us and yanked. And there we were. 100,000. "Double that," I said into the mic. "Yeah, Anders, how is it?" "Haven't yet begun. Radar still on me?" I heard a nervous laugh. He was nervous. "The General Hotchkiss just said something, Anders. He said you're on plot like stitches in a fat lady's hip. Ha! He's got us all in stitches, ha! Ha! This was it. I released my grip on the accelerator control, yet it slid up. They say you can't feel speed in the air unless there's something relative within vision to tip you off. They're going to have to revise that. You can not only feel speed, you can reach out and break hunks off it. In the XXE1, that is. I shook my head, took my eyes off the instruments, and looked down at the doll on my lap. Melrose? Here you, Anders. This is it. Reaching me on radar still. Naturally. All right. This was it. This was where the other 4 ships like the XXE1, the radio-controlled models, had disintegrated. This was where it happened, and they didn't come back anymore. I sucked in oxygen and let the accelerator control go over all the way. Pulling a ship out of a steep dive, yes. Blackout then, yes. If the wings stay with you, everything's fine and you live to mention the incident at the bar a little while later. Blackout accelerating, climbing, is not in the books, but blackout nevertheless. Not just plain blackout, but a thick, mucus, slimy, undulating blackout. The very black. The very, very black. General Hotchkiss. What's the saying, Melrose? Melrose. Doesn't answer. General Eaton. Try again. Melrose. Yes, sir. General Hotchkiss. What's he saying, Melrose? General Eaton. Still nothing? Melrose. Nothing. General Hotchkiss. Damn it, you still got him on radar, haven't you? Melrose. Yes, sir. General Hotchkiss. Well, damn it, what's it doing? Melrose. Still going up, sir. General Eaton. How far up? Melrose. Signal takes 60 seconds to get back, sir. General Hotchkiss. God in heaven, 120,000 miles out, halfway to the moon. How much more fuel has he? Melrose. 5 seconds, sir. Then the auto switch cuts in. Power will go off until he nears atmosphere again. After that, if he isn't conscious, well, I'm awfully afraid we've lost another ship. General Eaton. Cold-blooded. The purple drapes before my eyes were wavering. Hung like rippled steel pieces of a caisson suspended by a perilously thin whisper of thread, they swayed, hesitated, shuddered their entire length, then began to bend in the middle from the combined weights of 13 galaxies. The bend became a cracking bulge that in another second would explode, destruction directly into my face. I screamed. Is that you, Anders? I screamed good this time. Anders, are you all right? What happened? I couldn't get through to you. I took my hand from the accelerator control and stared numbly at it. The mark of it was deep in the skin. I sucked in oxygen. Anders, your power is off. When you hear the signal, you've got just 3 more seconds. You know what to do then. You've been out of the envelope, Anders. You broke through the atmosphere. And then I heard him speak to somebody else. He must have been speaking to somebody else. He couldn't have meant me. Christ's sake, give me a cigarette. The guy's still alive. I suppose I was grinning when they unstrapped me and slid me out of the hatch. They were grinning back at any rate. The ground held me up surprisingly, like it always had all my life before. They'd stopped grinning now. Their eyes were eating the inside of the ship. They weren't interested in me any more. All they wanted was the instrument's readings. My feet could still move me, knew where to go, knew where to find the door that had the simple word plotting on it. The doll was there with her father. The 2 of them didn't say anything, just looked at me, just stared at me. I said, He tried damned hard. He put everything he had in it. He got me. He had me down, and there wasn't any up again for the rest of the world. For me there wasn't. They stared. Pop stared. The doll stared. Just one thing he forgot, I muttered. He gave me the tip off himself, and then he forgot it. He told me I wasn't all me any more, that a part of me had gone out to you since I was supposed to be in love with you. And that's where the tip-off lies. I wasn't all me anymore, but I hadn't lost anything. You know why, doll?" They stared. "Simple. Any damn fool would tumble. If I wasn't all me, then you weren't all you. Part of you was me, get it? And you weren't scheduled to bust out today. Not you. Me. And that's what he couldn't work over. That's what brought me down again. He couldn't touch that." I stopped for a moment. I said suddenly, "What the hell are you guys staring at?" I growled. "That's my baby," said the doll. "No strings," I said. "Like we said." Her words were soft petals. "Like we said, baby. Just like we said." "Sure. Only damn it, I don't like it that way. I want strings, see? I want meshes of 'em, balls of 'em, like what comes in yarn. Get it?" The doll grinned. "Sure, baby. You're sure you want it that way?" "Sure, I'm sure. I just said it, didn't I? Didn't I?" "You just said it, baby." She left her father's side, came over to me, put her arm in mine, pulled close. We turned, started to go out the door. "Where you guys goin'?" asked Pop. We turned again. He looked like something was skipped somewhere on a soundtrack he'd been listening to. I grinned. "Got to look for a brown Bess," I said. "Museum just lost one." The end. Subscribe for your daily stories of futures past. And now, for the next story. Boy Meets Dyevitza by Robert F. Young. Originally published in Amazing Stories, October 1962. Narrated by Tom Trussel. A thrilling news bulletin dated September 11, 1996, was recently handed to me by an assistant who is too young to remember the star over Moscow, and it is toward him and others like him that the following history is directed. If it resembles fiction more than it does fact, the similarity is wholly intentional, for it is only through fiction that the past can be brought back to life. When Gordon Andrews first saw the girl, he took it for granted that she was a Venusian, a natural enough assumption in view of the fact that he was on Venus. She was kneeling beside a small brook, humming a little tune and washing out a pair of stockings, and so intent was she on her tune and her task that she did not hear him when he stepped out of the forest behind her. Her bobbed hair was a colour of horse chestnuts, and her clothing consisted of grey culottes, a grey blouse, black leather boots, and a small grey kepi. The tune she was humming was a passage from Tchaikovsky's Swan Lake. Thus far, Gordon had taken Venus pretty much in his stride. The data supplied by the Venus probes during the early 60s, while obscure with regard to her cloud cover, had conclusively disproved former theories to the effect that she lacked a breathable atmosphere and possessed a surface temperature of more than 100 degrees centigrade, and had prepared him for what he had found: an atmosphere richer in oxygen content than Earth's, a comfortable climate, and a planet-wide sea, unbroken as yet save for an equatorial landmass no larger than a modest island. The data, by its very nature, had also prepared him for the possibility of human life. It had not prepared him, however, for a Venusian maiden on humming terms with Swan Lake. Small wonder, then, that he gasped. The girl dropped her stockings and shot to her feet so fast that she could have toppled into the brook if he hadn't leaped forward and caught her arm. She had a heart-shaped face, and her eyes were the hue of harebells. At the moment they were filled with alarm. Presently, however, the alarm went away, and recognition took its place. "Oh, it's you," she said, freeing her arm. He took an involuntary step backward. "Me?" he said. Yes, Captain Gordon Andrews of the United States Space Force, is it not? You look quite a lot like your photograph. He could only stare at her. I do? Yes, I saw it in one of your materialistic capitalistic magazines. She stood up a little straighter, an act that brought her hair-well blue eyes on a level with the topmost button of his fatigues. I am Major Sonia Mikhailovna of the Soviet Space Force, and my ship is in the next valley. I arrived here yesterday. He got the picture then, and he felt sick. He should have known from her too correct, slightly stilted English, from the military cut of her clothing. He should have known in the first place, for that matter. It was the same old humiliating story. The manned Venus shot had been publicized for months before the actual launching, and he had been written up in every newspaper and magazine in the country. Articles had paid homage to his suburban upbringing, saluted his record at the Shepard Space Academy, praised his career as an orbital pilot, romanticized his bachelorhood, described how he liked his eggs, and inferred what a good catch he would be. Meanwhile, the Russians had gone quietly and systematically about their business, and at the precise psychological moment had pulled their usual unexpected coup. First it had been Laika, then Zvezdoshka, then Gagarin, then Dymov, the first man in the moon. Now it was Major Sonia Mikhailovna. But why a woman? And why one so seemingly delicate that you marveled at her ability to withstand the acceleration of takeoff? Suddenly he got the whole picture, and he really felt sick. He could see the humiliating headlines, or rather, their English counterparts, in Pravda. Soviet space girl beats capitalist cosmonaut to Venus. USSR triumph again. I suppose you picked up my ship on your radar while I was coming in, and fixed the time and location of my landing, he said bitterly. Sonia Mikhailovna nodded. My own arrival time has already been officially recorded, but the announcement of my success had to be withheld until I could establish your arrival time, and the exact time difference could be computed. Soon now, the news of our glorious new victory will be released to the world. She bent down, retrieved her stockings from the brook, and wrung them out. Straightening, she hung them on a low-hanging branch of a nearby tree. They were cotton, he noticed, and there was a hole in one of the toes. Suddenly she gave a start. Following the direction of her gaze, he gave one too. So did the man and the woman who had just emerged from the forest. Since his arrival 4 hours ago, Gordon had been wondering, among a host of other things, whether the ultraviolet rays of the sun could penetrate the planet's thick cloud cover. He saw now that they not only could, but did. The man and the woman were unquestionably members of a white-skinned race, and both possessed suntans so deep and golden that in contrast their dark blue eyes seemed even darker and their bright blonde hair even brighter. Their white knee-length tunics augmented the effect, and in cooperation with their handsome faces supplied them with a god and goddess-like aspect. Unfortunately, this aspect was somewhat marred by their one concession to personal adornment, gleaming neckbands forged from a copper-like metal. As neither native appeared to be armed, Gordon saw no cause for alarm, and after his initial surprise he regarded them quite calmly. So did Sonia Mikhailovna. This time, however, the two Venusians did not reciprocate. Their eyes had grown wide, and now an unmistakable expression of disbelief settled upon their handsome faces. At length the man touched his own neck, and then the woman's. Then he pointed, almost accusingly it seemed, toward Gordon and Sonia, and demanded something in an unintelligible tongue. Gordon proceeded to touch his own neck. Next he touched Sonia's, ever so lightly, of course. "Gordon," he said. "Sonia." He was rewarded for his perspicacity by 2 horrified stares and a pair of hoarse gasps. Then, before he could utter another word, the 2 Venusians turned and vanished into the forest. He stared after them. So did Sonia Mikhailovna. "Did you know," he asked presently, "that Venus was inhabited?" "Our scientists suspected that it might be," she shrugged. "Anyway, what does it matter now? By your stupid action you destroyed whatever chance we had of establishing friendly relations." Gordon felt his face grow hot. "When you meet aliens, the first thing you always do is exchange names with them," he said. "Everybody knows that." "Everybody who reads your stereotyped science fiction knows it, you mean? And after you find out their names, you say, 'Take me to your leader,' and their leader turns out to be a big, beautiful blonde who is stacked. Well, I think I will be getting back to my ship." "I don't see anybody stopping you," Gordon said. She gave him a long look. In the roseate radiance of the Venusian afternoon, her face had a pink-cheeked little girl aspect. "In imperialistic idiom, that means, I suppose, that it is a matter of complete indifference to you what I do." "It sure does," Gordon said. "Well, I'll be seeing you." Leaving her standing by the brook, he re-entered the forest and struck out over the little hills that rolled back from the littoral-like green inland waves to break riotously against the high ridge that encompassed the island's interior. In his initial enthusiasm, he had wandered farther from his ship than he had meant to, and he had been about to turn back when he had seen the girl. Now he had another reason for returning. A dark cloud was due to arrive over Washington in the very near future, and it was up to him to send out a bad weather warning. Multicolored flowers carpeted virtually every square inch of the forest floor. Finch-like birds of rainbow hues darted overhead, leaving exquisite wakes of song. Squirrel-like mammals spiraled tree trunks so swiftly that they were barely visible. Venus had turned out to be the Venus of the romantics, rather than the Venus of the scientists. And Gordon, who, for all his scientific training, was a romantic himself, found the eventuality exhilarating, even in his present doldrums. Perhaps when man reached Mars, he would find blue canals after all, no matter what the scientists said to the contrary, and fragile glass cities tinkling in cinnamon-scented winds. The day was nearly done when he reached the cove near the shore of which his spaceship stood, and darkness was upon him by the time he climbed the metal Jacob's ladder and stepped through the lock. In blithe disregard of learned opinion, Venus's rotation period approximated Earth's. However, her cloud cover brought about an abrupt and early departure of daylight. In his haste, he did not bother to close the lock, but headed straight for the radio alcove and beamed the news of his historic meeting with Major Sonia Mikhailovna across the immensities to Space Force headquarters at New Canaveral, appending it with the information that the peoples of Earth could no longer consider themselves the sole inheritors of the solar system. Owing to the distance involved, over 5 minutes elapsed before he received a reply. He was informed that the USSR had already released the news of the new space victory and that the Soviet Premier had declared a national holiday in honor of the occasion. New Canaveral also provided him with an unsolicited thumbnail biography of Major Sonia Mikhailovna. Her father, Peter, was a famous Russian pianist. She was 23 years of age, unmarried, spoke 6 languages fluently, had a nodding acquaintance with 11 more, held a doctor's degree in anthropology, was an accomplished ballerina, and in the last Olympic Games had won the gold medal in the gymnastics competition. She had been chosen for the Venus shot from a group of 100 trained women volunteers, and the rank of major had been bestowed upon her in honor of her service to her country. Also, Gordon heard the footsteps then, and whirled around. but the 3 Venusians who had crowded into the little control room were upon him before he could draw his pistol. They relieved him of it quickly and tossed it to one side. Then 2 of them held him while the 3rd covered his nose and mouth with a wet cloth that reeked of a cloying perfume. He blacked out in a matter of seconds. A new day was dawning when he climbed out of the deep well of drug-induced unconsciousness and opened his eyes. His wrists and ankles were bound, and he was lying on a stretcher fashioned of lashed-together saplings. It was being carried by 2 gold-skinned Venusians, one of whom was a male member of the couple who had come upon him and Sonia the previous afternoon. He raised his head. Apparently the perfume he had inhaled possessed only part of the properties of chloroform. In any event, he felt no ill effects. Turning his head, he discovered that his captors consisted of about 2 dozen natives, all told, and that every one of them wore a metal collar. Half of them were women, and one of the women was the one he and Sonia had seen the day before. There was another stretcher just behind his own. Sonia Mikhailovna's face was hidden, but he could see her horse chestnut-coloured hair. "Are you all right?" he called. She did not answer. Clearly the captors had used the same drug on her that they had used on him, and she was still under its influence. A number of other things were also clear. The 2 original Venusians had been part of a larger group, an excursion party perhaps, and after vanishing into the forest, they had rejoined the main body and reported his and Sonia's presence. The decision to capture them must have been made shortly afterward. The trees thinned out on Gordon's right, providing him with a glimpse of distant blue-misted hills and grey-blue sea, and bringing home the realization that he was being borne along the lofty inland ridge that circled the island's interior. For the first time since he had opened his eyes, fear touched him. In less than 2 months, Venus would approach to within 30 million miles of Earth, the distance which the Space Force technicians had used in computing his return trajectory and in estimating the amount of fuel he would need. In all probability, Sonia's return trajectory and fuel supply had been similarly computed and estimated, and if so, she was in the same boat he was. If they were kept captive for any length of time, they might not be able to return to Earth for another year, and while it was conceivable that they might be able to live off the land after their supplies gave out, it was far from likely. Maybe, though, eating wouldn't be a problem. Dead people are as unable to eat as they are unable to tell tales. The trees thinned out again, on its left this time, and he saw a bowl-shaped valley far below. There were green fields and blue lakes and scattered clusters of white buildings. Villages, no doubt. They weren't large enough to have registered on his viewscope during his orbit, but they were large enough to register on his retina now. The faint trail which the Venusians had been following began zigzagging down the side of the ridge, and the going became more difficult. They kept glancing uneasily at the sky, as though they momentarily expected it to fall down upon them. Gordon could discern no cause for their concern. As far as he could see, the sky was the same hazy pink it had been yesterday. But then, he was not a Venusian, and consequently knew nothing about such matters. At the foot of the ridge, the procession was joined by other natives, indicating that a courier had been sent ahead to herald its approach. All of the newcomers wore metal collars, and all of them looked at Gordon and Sonia briefly, then quickly glanced away. Sonia, Gordon saw, turning his head, had awakened and was regarding her surroundings with eyes that seemed to have even more harebell blue in them than before. "Are you all right?" he called again. "Yes," she said, after a pause. "I am all right." One of the nearer villages proved to be the captor's destination, and after passing between several neatly laid-out fields, the principal crop of which appeared to be a Venusian form of sweet corn, The procession started down a narrow thoroughfare in the direction of a large circular stone building, surmounted by a steeple-like chimney from which smoke arose in a tenuous blue-white column. The buildings on either side of the street were plain to the point of bleakness, the facades featureless save for oval windows and narrow doorways. Villagers were everywhere, and all of them, men and women alike, sported metal collars. Children, however, were noticeably absent, though once Gordon caught sight of a round, wide-eyed face in one of the oval windows. He had to look fast to see it, though, because an instant later a woman appeared and yanked the child back out of sight. He was more bewildered than ever. Obviously, judging from their reactions, the Venusians considered him and Sonia to be guilty of some manner of immoral crime. But the only crime they had committed that he could think of was trespassing, and certainly trespassing couldn't be construed as immoral. What in the world had they done then? The procession had reached the large circular structure and was filing through its vaulted entrance. Terraced tiers of stone benches encircled a small flagstone-paved arena, in the centre of which were two altar-like stone blocks placed about 5 feet apart. Just behind the blocks stood a primitive forge, and beside the forge stood an even more primitive anvil. A gold-skinned blacksmith was busily operating a pair of crude bellows. Gordon and Sonia were placed on the blocks and strapped down by means of leather thongs. The tiers of benches filled rapidly, and an air of expectation rapidly permeated the smoky atmosphere. Gordon began to sweat, a reaction due partly, but not wholly, to the heat thrown off by the forge. Sonia's face was white. He tried to think of something reassuring to say to her, but for the life of him he couldn't. Quite by accident, his eyes met hers, and to his consternation her cheeks changed from white to pink, and she turned abruptly away. The audience began to chant, and presently a man of noble mien appeared, bearing 2 strips of copper-like metal. He handed them to the blacksmith, and then stepped back and took up a position equidistant from each block, after which he proceeded to look sternly down, first into Gordon's face and then into Sonia's. Gordon couldn't see what the blacksmith was doing in the meantime, but judging from the sounds the man was making, he was busily occupied. Bellows wheezed and coals crackled, and metal clanged on metal as though a Venusian Tarnhelm was in the works. Gordon knew perfectly well, however, that one wasn't, and he wasn't particularly surprised when, a little while later, a water-soaked cloth was wrapped around his neck and was followed by one of the 2 metal strips. Steam rose from the wet cloth as the blacksmith held the 2 ends of the strip together until they fused, and even more steam arose when he tempered the resultant seam with a container of water. The job completed to his satisfaction, he removed the cloth and let the still warm collar settle against Gordon's neck. The other strip was similarly fused around Sonia's neck, after which a man of noble mien went into action. Raising his hand in a signal for the audience to cease its chanting, he launched a long sonorous speech, part of which he directed at Gordon, and part of which he directed at Sonia. After a ringing peroration, during which he seemed to threaten each of them, he produced a pinch of white powder and sprinkled some of it over each of their heads. Finally he drew a long double-edged knife. Well, this is it, Gordon thought. But it wasn't. The man of noble mien merely used the knife to cut their bonds. Then, after untying the thongs that secured them to the stone blocks, he raised both arms in a gesture for them to stand up. Gordon massaged his legs before putting his weight on them, and Sonia followed the same precaution. He could hardly believe that they were still alive, but seemingly they were. And healthy, too, if the pinkness of Sonia's cheeks was an accurate criterion. The man of noble mien nodded his noble head in the direction of the entrance, and they accompanied him outside. Gordon did a double-take when they stepped into the street. It was strewn with freshly picked flowers of every hue and description, and lined by little children waving green twigs that resembled olive branches. He came to a staring stop. "Won't someone please tell me what's coming off?" he said. Sonia stopped beside him. "Don't you really know?" she asked, her eyes fixed on a flower at her feet that was almost as red as her face had become. "I know we're the focal point of some kind of ceremony, but what kind of a ceremony is it?" Slowly Sonia raised her eyes. "It's a wedding ceremony," she said. They married us." The flower carpet stretched all the way to the outskirts of the village, and so did the 2 lines of little children. Gordon stumbled along at Sonia's side, hopeful that he would wake up any second in the bachelors' barracks at New Canaveral. But the street stubbornly refused to dissipate, and so did the little children and the man of noble mien. As for Sonia, much less than dissipating, she took on added detail, and the metal collar around her neck seemed to throw off flame after lambent flame, and each one was brighter than its predecessor. The man of noble mien escorted them outside the village, then turned his back on them as though they no longer existed, and returned the way he had come. After his passage, the little children broke ranks and began playing in the flowers. Gordon faced Sonia. "Now maybe you'll tell me why they married us," he said. "I will tell you on the way back to our ships." She did not speak again till they reached the top of the ridge. Then, after she got her breath back, she said, "They married us because, underneath their demigod exteriors, they are nothing more than Bronze Age Puritans. Yesterday, when the man and woman saw us standing together by the brook, they were bewildered because neither of us was wearing what to them is a universal symbol of marriage, a metal collar, and when you touched me, they were shocked. You see, in their society, no man and woman can be alone together unless they are married, and it is unthinkable for a man to touch a woman unless she is his wife, or some immediate member of his family." "We could have been brother and sister," Gordon pointed out. "Do I look like your sister?" He had to admit that she didn't. "Anyway," Sonia went on, "their trailing us to different houses must have convinced them, and the rest of their party, that we are not. In the eyes of the Venusians, you see, our spaceships are just that, houses. Odd ones, perhaps, by their architectural standards, but houses just the same. How else could a simple Bronze Age culture interpret them?" Gordon ducked beneath a blossom-laden bough. "How did you know they're Puritans?" "I didn't, at first. I merely assumed, from their reactions to us, that they must be, and then I got to thinking about how neither the sun nor the moon can be seen through the cloud cover, and it occurred to me that their concept of one god must have come much earlier in their civilization than would have been the case on Earth, owing to the fact that there could have been no intermediate phase of sun or moon worship. Perhaps, somewhere along the line, they had a Christ whose teachings they misinterpreted, and no doubt they have a version of Genesis similar to the Judeo-Christian one, except that in theirs the problem of creating the sun and the moon and the stars never arose. Anyway, now that they have married us, they are no longer interested in us. All that concerned them was our moral welfare. It seems to be growing dark." "It can't be," Gordon said. "It's only a little past noon, which reminds me, I skipped breakfast, and supper too." He pulled 2 concentrated food biscuits out of his fatigue-old pockets. "I suggest that we stop for lunch." They sat down side by side beneath a tree with blue blossoms shaped like Dutchmen's breeches hanging from its boughs. They were halfway down the opposite slope of the ridge now, but Sonia's ship was still many hours away, and his was an hour farther yet. They ate silently for a while. Then, "There is one thing that puzzles me," Sonia said. Yes?
Why did they marry us so soon? Why was there such a need for haste?
You made it clear enough. They misinterpreted our behaviour and were shocked out of their self-righteous puritanical skins. She shook her head.
Shocked, yes, but not enough to have rushed us through a ceremony that under ordinary circumstances would have required days of preparation. There must have been another reason.
Suddenly she glanced up through the foliage of the sky.
It is growing dark.
There was no longer any denying the fact. The roseate radiance of the youthful afternoon had transmuted to a sort of grey murk. Moreover, the air had grown appreciably colder. Gordon stood up. I think we'd better be on our way, he said. It's going to rain. A good 3 hours passed, however, before he felt the first drop. He and Sonia were in the hills now, and the ridge was far behind them. The rain was gentle, but it was persistent too, and both of them were soaked before another hour had gone by.
We will go to my ship, Sonia said, brushing back a rain-wet strand of horse-chestnut-coloured hair from her forehead. It is much closer than yours.
Somehow, her offering him shelter in a Soviet ship did not strike him as being in the least incongruous. And when, a moment later, he slipped his arm around her waist, that didn't seem incongruous either. And when she permitted it to remain there, even that didn't seem incongruous. For some crazy mixed-up reason, life seemed singularly devoid of incongruities all of a sudden, and amazingly forthright and simple. The rain was extremely penetrating. So penetrating, in fact, that it penetrated his skin as well as his clothing. And it had a curious lulling effect. No, that wasn't the word. A curious soporific effect. No, that wasn't the word either. Well, what word was it then? He couldn't call it to mind till after they reached Sonia's ship and were standing at the base of the Jacob's ladder. By then it was too late. By then he was gazing softly down into her eyes, and she was gazing softly up into his, and the world was well on its way toward being well lost. He tried to force himself to step back and regard the situation with the cold and objective eye of a scientist, to evaluate the strange and wondrous quality that fell in the form of rain, and to tie it in with the Venusian's motivation in marrying him and Sonia post-haste. In vain. All he could think of was the tune she had been humming by the brook, and the hole he had seen in one of her cheap cotton stockings. And then she was in his arms, and he was kissing her rain-wet lips, and Washington and Moscow were forgotten place names on a map that had no more meaning than the paper it was printed on. The rain continued to fall, softly, gently, insistently. It sang soft songs in the leaves. It murmured, it whispered, it laughed. It did not cease till morning. After starting back to his ship, Gordon mentally rehearsed the report which he and Sonia had agreed to send to their respective headquarters. It described briefly how they had been captured and released, but discreetly made no reference either to the wedding ceremony or to the rain. They had unanimously agreed that the situation was complicated enough without complicating it further. He had gone less than half a mile when his collar began to press against his throat. Thereafter, the pressure increased with every step he took, till finally he came to a semi-strangled stop. It was as though he had reached the end of an invisible leash. The pressure lessened after he backed up a few paces, went away altogether after he backed up a dozen more. There was only one explanation. The metal from which his and Sonia's collars, as well as those of the Venusians, had been forged, possessed magnetic properties unknown to terrestrial metals, and the attraction between objects fashioned from it grew progressively stronger
as the square of the distance between them increased. Either the Venusians had disciplined this attraction so that it was limited to objects fashioned from the same stock, or the ore from which the metal was processed was naturally subdivided into small magnetically independent veins. Gordon did not know which was the case, but there was one thing he did know. When the Venusians married you, they meant business. He began retracing his steps back to Sonia's ship. Halfway there, he saw her running toward him. Her white face told him that her collar had been giving her a hard time too, and that she had arrived at a conclusion similar to his own.
"Gordon, what are we going to do?" she gasped when she came up to him.
"We'll get them off some way," he reassured her. "Come on, I've got the necessary tools in my ship." He tried all morning before he gave up. The collars were impervious to his best shears, and his hardest file failed to scratch the surface. Using his acetylene torch was out of the question. He sat disconsolately down on the ground several feet from one of the landing jacks. Sonia sat down beside him.
"We won't be able to go back at all now," she said. "Neither your ship nor mine can carry us both, and there's no way we can occupy more than one of them at a time."
Gordon sighed. "I suppose we could radio for help," he said presently. "But if we did, we'd have to tell them everything that happened. I'm afraid they'd be sort of skeptical about the rain. Of course, we could leave that part out, but I'm afraid they'd be skeptical about the collars too. In fact, I don't think they'd even believe us. They'd simply jump to the conclusion that we don't want to return, and would order us back on the double the minute maximum juxtaposition occurred. No, if we radio for help, we've got to have a good concrete reason for doing so, one that they'll be able to understand and believe." Sonia managed a wan smile.
I can just see myself standing before the Council of Ministers, blaming what happened on the rain," she said.
Gordon laughed. "And I can just see myself standing before a Congressional Investigating Committee, explaining about the collars." He began to feel better. A situation that could lend itself to humour could not be wholly hopeless. "Here's what we'll do for now," he went on. "We'll radio back the report we agreed upon, and then we'll go on with our work as though nothing is wrong. Sometimes problems solve themselves, but just in case this one shouldn't, and we can't go back, we'll build a cabin so we'll have some place to live." Sonia's eyes sparkled like a little girl's.
"Let's build it by that little brook," she said, where we first met."
"Fine," Gordon said. During the ensuing weeks, they spent their mornings gathering data and their afternoons working on the cabin. They took time out to analyze a sample of rainwater, but it evinced no unusual qualities. Gordon was not surprised. Shortly after landing, he had tested a sample of Venusian water for drinking purposes, and with the same result. Clearly, the quality that had undermined their inhibitions originated in the cloud cover and evaporated soon after it reached the ground. After the cabin was finished, they began going on afternoon hikes into the hills, tramping through idyllic woods, talking and laughing, exclaiming now and then at unexpected patterns of flowers, starting at sudden rainbow flights of birds. They saw but few Venusians, and the few they did see ignored them. One afternoon they found a fern-bordered pool beneath a white-skirted waterfall, and after that they came there every day to swim. Sonia's skin darkened to a deep gold, and looking at her, Gordon sometimes found it hard to breathe. Every so often the sky darkened, and rain fell, but the rain was superfluous now, and as for the invisible magnetic chain that bound them together, that had been supplanted by another invisible chain that was 10 times as strong. And yet the original one still remained, and the problem it represented grew more and more acute
as their scheduled departure times approached. They desperately needed a good practical reason to give their respective governments for not returning to Earth, and quite providentially at the very last moment, though it seemed anything but providential at the time, they discovered that they had one, or rather, Sonia did. On the morning of the day she was scheduled to undergo the rigours of acceleration, she regarded Gordon shyly across the little breakfast table he had built. I am going to have a baby," she said. The news, when it arrived in Moscow, had something of the impact of a hydrogen bomb, and when it leaked through a hitherto unsuspected crevice in the Kremlin, there was a sort of chain reaction throughout the entire Soviet Union. It was at this point in his political career that the Soviet Premier discovered a universal truth. People the world over, whether they be communistic or capitalistic, have a very large soft spot in their hearts when it comes to babies. That spring, Venus outshone herself and hung in the evening sky over Moscow somewhat in the manner of the star over Bethlehem. The Premier had a haunted look on his face when he appeared before the Council of Ministers. He was not alone. The ministers had haunted looks on their faces too. What did you do when you had to cope with a forthcoming space baby who would be half capitalist and half communist, and who was already adored by the whole world? The Premier did not know. But there was one thing he did know. In the last analysis, any party is the people, and while you can con the people into believing that black bread is white bread, and that caraway seeds are caviar, you cannot con them into believing that a child conceived on the planet of love by a Russian girl and an American boy is anything other than a harbinger of peace. So in the long run, what the Premier did was the only thing he could have done. He arranged a summit meeting with the President of the United States and the Prime Minister of Great Britain, and for the first time in history, the East and the West really got together. The threat of war could not, of course, be totally eliminated at such short notice, but a number of aggravations that could precipitate a war could be eliminated, and were. This accomplished, the three leaders drew up plans for a super three-man spacecraft to be built post-haste by the best engineers the three nations could supply, and unanimously agreed that the pilot would be English, the obstetrician Russian, and the nurse American. It has been said that after the meeting the Soviet Premier and the President of the United States got together and began thinking up names. This is extremely doubtful. Anyway, if they did, they were wasting their time, for Sonia Mikhailovna and Gordon Andrews had already taken care of the matter. The name they chose is well known today, except perhaps by those for whom this history has been recorded, which brings us back to the aforementioned news bulletin. In common with most news bulletins, it has about as much poetry in it as an old shoe, but its message shines forth with a radiance that excels even the radiance cast by the star over Moscow. Geneva, Switzerland, September 11, 1996. The young Russo-American ambassador-at-large, Peter Gordonovich Andrews, announced this morning that his peace plan has been accepted by all major and minor powers, and that the war that has threatened mankind for the past half-century can no longer occur. The end. Subscribe for your daily stories of futures past. And now, for the next story. The Oddly Elusive Brunette by John Victor Peterson. Originally published in Infinity, November 1958. Narrated by Tom Trussel. Certainly a faithful representation of a male simian cast in brass would, granted reasoning powers, have felt unusual trepidation if exposed to the Wisconsin weather that fateful winter morning. I myself was inordinately glad that I lived in the project's bachelor officers' quarters, only a short block from the Eunuch Wag's installation, and that my first experience with Wisconsin winter 3 years before had prompted the purchase of the thermoparka I was then wearing. Eunuch Wags is, I realize, a formidable array of letters. Though quickly recognizable, of course, from constant stereo news repetition, it is usually not immediately decipherable, except by the UN which spawned it, and the eggheads who maintain it. I help maintain it. I also maintain that I'm not an egghead. Literally, that is. I do have a bushy, albeit greying head of hair, and a reasonably handsome, Mum always said, face beneath. Otherwise the brunette might have... But first I must translate Eunuch Wags. It's important. When the United Nations finally established worldwide atomic control 3 years ago, in 1965, it created the Atomic Control Monitor Establishment at its New York headquarters with an alternate installation here near Racine. Piecing together most of the capitals, the alternate setup comes out Eunuch Mea. The WAGs, of course, is easy. W for Wisconsin, AGS for alternating gradient synchrotron. Everyone knows what an AGS is from the publicity given to the 25 BeV unit which went in at Brookhaven National Laboratories back in the International Geophysical Year. Pics of that 700-foot diameter horizontal donut were in all papers, mags, and facts when it started producing anti-protons, anti-neutrons, and, among the Long Island neighbours, a few tremulous anti-science folk. Despite the parka, I was shivering like a displaced Hottentot on Pluto at Aphelion as I approached the Eunuch building next to the 1,400-foot diameter rings of WAGs. Activating the Harlan sphincter, I stepped into the console room. I activated the Parker's auto-open when I realized that the last man out the night before, taking some dimpled weather gal's prognostications as utter veracity, had apparently kicked off the thermostat. The room was only slightly less frigid than external Racine. Re-zippering, I kicked over the master switch to activate WAGs, which had to be operating when the other physicists arrived. Then I beelined for the thermostat. "You'd think," I said to the room's emptiness, "that certain sad sapiens of the genus Homo would think more of personal physical comfort than the saving of infinitesimal quantities of fuel." Which is when there came from behind me a chattering but pleasant feminine voice saying, "Cut the recriminations and get some heat in here, but fast, Professor." I was startled, but turned slowly nonetheless, rationalizing that the place had been deserted when I'd entered, and that no one else could be physically present since I'd entered alone, and the only door hadn't been opened since. I fully expected to find one of the headquarters stenos grinning at me over the closed-circuit stereo from the ad building, and I wasn't about to begin to feed her ego by showing startlement. I faced instead a very much present, very much alive, and very lovely raven-haired young lady who was in that remarkably provocative state of nearly absolute dishabille that only the new Parisian sunsuits can provide. The young lady's excitingly rounded curves were, however, a rather curious blue, and it had fleetingly occurred to me that she was an extraterrestrial when my better sense came to the fore, and I said rather inanely, "You should be wearing more in Wisconsin this time of year." Her dark eyes flashed, and she wriggled her shapely shoulders angrily with interesting shockwaves. "Since when is this Wisconsin?" she cried. "It's hogs exploding that caused this cold." She paused. "Isn't it?" "Hogs," I echoed. Things started to add then that by logic couldn't. Hogs is a new installation, an accelerator where two streams of particles orbiting in opposite directions were caused to meet head-on, hence the HO. Hogues is at Cape Canaveral, Florida, whence American satellites have lanced spaceward since IGY. Cape Canaveral in February boasts the weather that permits, if not cries, for the abbreviated type of costume this gorgeous young damsel was wearing. While I was thinking, I was also listening, and she was spluttering that her father was General Schoner of the Atomic Energy Commission, and that he would have me suitably punished if I had kidnapped her. "Now wait a sec," I said, throwing her my parka after a natural period of bug-eyed hesitation. "I wouldn't be about to kidnap anyone, least of all a flighty teenager." "I'm 21, she said, her eyes flashing with indignation, and proceeded to enfold the parka around everything save the tip of her cold pink nose and her long curved legs. The elusive tip of her nose wasn't worth trying to follow as she buried her raven-haired head in the fur collar. There was more of the curvaceous lower extremities in view which merited and claimed my attention, devoted attention. "Well?" she said. "Yes, thank you," I answered, glad the heat, the furnace's thermal radiation, that is, was coming up. "I mean, what'll we do?" "I hadn't given that much mature thought," I answered, "but now that you mention—" "Stop the parrying," she cut in sharply. "Parrying was farthest from my mind," I said. She spluttered, then asked, "Are you telling the truth?" "About what?" "That this is Wisconsin." "Yes, it certainly is." "Well, what day is it, and time?" "Wednesday, February 14th, 1968, and precisely 8:25 a.m. She was silent for a moment, letting the parka fall away from her lovely face. Then she said, "But it was only a few moments ago, considering the difference in time zones, that I was at Cape Canaveral. They were activating Hogues today, and I was there with Dad. How could I possibly be in Wisconsin now?" "That," I said, "is the question. With a capital Q. How could you possibly?" I stopped in shock. Those dark eyes had been looking directly at me, and the image of them was planted on my retinal patterns like a commercial symbol lingering on a stereotube. But she, eyes and all, and I do mean all, was gone. Just like that. Blinko. Not over and out. Just out. I know I acted irrationally then. I scurried around the quickly warming room, searching behind the proton beam accelerator, the control and monitor consoles, the relay racks and equipment cabinets, feeling that she just had to be somewhere. The door opened. I whirled around expectantly. It wasn't she. It was George Herman, my assistant. George regarded me searchingly, his lean face lugubrious. "What gives, Bob?" he asked. "You look as if you lost the world." "Maybe I have," I said, leaping to the visiphone. George watched me button Miami Exchange and said, "You realize what Jack Hagan thinks about long-distance calls?" I ignored him. I realized all right. Hagan's project boss, and has laid the law down plenty on the question of what he considers unnecessary calls. But how can a scientist operate if he can't call up others in his specialty when he gets the glimmerings of a new idea? Miami answered, and I asked for General Schoner at Patrick Air Force Base. Priority. I've top secret clearance, and I put my marked ID card on the pickup too. Abruptly, a brush-moustached frozen military face regarded me. "So you're Robert Mitchell of Unukmere, Wags," the face growled. "Well, make it short." "It's about your daughter, General," I said. The face became human. "But what can you know about Elaine? You're in Wisconsin, aren't you?" And, at my nod, "Well, she vanished from here when we activated Hogues. Don't tell me." "Yes, she was here," I said, "just a few minutes ago. Said that Hogues exploded." His twitching brows drew down. "It didn't explode. There was a defect in the ring, and particles of antimatter we haven't yet named escaped. That was just before we missed Elaine. Now, Mitchell, are you sure she was there? Can you describe her?" I felt that my descriptive detail was rather good, coming as it did from a confirmed bachelor whose attention had theretofore been devoted to scientific tomes and atom smashers. He nodded perplexedly as I finished. "Well, how do you account for it?" "General," I said slowly, "I'm a research physicist, and I certainly won't admit for a moment that it might have been an induced psionic manifestation. There's an answer in relativity, I'm sure, a logical answer. Right now, I'm far a space. I thought I knew antinucleonics, but Hogues has apparently spawned something research physicists haven't anticipated." "Well, where is Elaine now? Where did she go?" "I don't know," I answered dumbly. "But she didn't go, General. She was here, and then wasn't. But let me try to find her, General. God knows I'll do my best." He surveyed my face carefully. "I'm sure you will," he said. "Call me when you find her." I nodded wordlessly and rang off. Despite George Herman's admonitions raid long-distance calls, I immediately visiphoned every AGS installation in the States. The last call did it. I raised Al Benson in Phoenix, Arizona. He'd seen Elaine briefly. He'd been first in the control room at the Phoenix synchrotron and had just activated same when, bingo, she was there. He had in fact been just about to call me. She'd been wearing the parka which had stayed when she left. He found my name stenciled on the parka's left breast. Said she said the nicest man had lent it to her, which was nice to hear. "We've just got to find her," I said earnestly. He looked at me quizzically. "Bob, my boy, is the old perennial bachelor's veneer cracking?" I thought that one over. "I guess it is," I admitted. "Now, Al, any suggestions?" "I'm essentially a computer man," he said. "Give me some data and I might come up with something." I knew what Hogues had been intended to do, guide streams of particles in a chain-like pattern through the influence of magnetic fields of alternate direction, so that head-on collisions of particles would result. Theoretically, this should yield energies as enormous as the satellites reported present in cosmic radiation in space. But what side effects might result from Hogues' activation was difficult for even computers to conclude. There were other data. Times of vanishment, durations of presence here and at Phoenix, the fact that the Parker had gone with Elaine from here to Phoenix, but had remained at Phoenix upon her vanishment there. "She's drawn to an AGS unit upon its activation," Benson said. That was already obvious to me, but I didn't say so. Al Benson keeps his computer pretty high up on a throne. He went on. "Your Parker came here with Elaine because it had picked up some manner of static charge from her. For some reason it was discharged, degaussed maybe, while she was here, and so it stayed when she, didn't." I had looked at the wall clock as he was talking. "Look, Al," I cried. "Cut for now. Hanford AGS should have been activated a few minutes ago. I'm going to call Ted Sosnowski there. Out, boy." I rang Hanford, Washington. Yes, Elaine had been there, briefly. Sosnowski started to go into rather ecstatic description of her undeniable charms, but since he obviously had no datum to add, I cut him off and rang Berkeley, California. The Bevatron had not been activated since the time of the accident at Hogues. Berkeley had nothing to report. I had George Herman bring me the secret files then, and was scanning the list of all synchrotrons in the world, known either through publicity or downright espionage. A few were operating without UN sanction, when the visiphone buzzed. It was General Schoner. I briefed him and told him I was about to try visiphoning all known AGS installations. "Hold it up," he said. "I want to call the Pentagon. I think I can pull strings and get Eunuch Mir WAGs fully activated." "That would do it, General," I cried. "I didn't think I'd stand a chance if I asked." "Look, Bob," he cut in, "Elaine's my daughter, and I'm not having her flitting around fraternizing with every Tom, Dick and Harry, even if they are PhDs. She made one mistake, and I'm not having her make another." "Mistake?" I asked. "A pilot," he said. "Nice enough guy, but it turned out he was already married and intended to remain so. Incidentally, Bob, you resemble him to a considerable degree." "I do?" I recalled the data. Elaine had been here for about 3 minutes, but at Phoenix and Hanford was only about 1 minute apiece. Was I a stabilizing influence? No, I reasoned. It couldn't be me. It must be Wags. It's an odd 40-bev job. Maybe its magnetic field had a partially polarizing effect upon the anti-nucleonic factor. "Please call the Pentagon, General. And, General, when we get Elaine back, will you consider me as a prospective son-in-law?" "You get her back, Bob, and ask her the big question. If she says yes, well, fine. You look okay to me." "Thanks, General." "Call me Mike," he said. "Out." It's a good thing Mike Shoner's a 4-star general. If he'd been a second lieutenant, his daughter would have bounced around the then infinitely sadder Earth to the end of her years, pursued by the vagrant daydreams of 100 bug-eyed physicists until gobbled benzodrine and tranquilizers took their toll of said dreaming BEPs. As it was afternoon here at Racine when Mike Shoner called back and told me to stand by for the activation of UNACMEA Wags. I stood in the console room for half an hour while the monitor screens went on one by one until the 5 banks of them on the one wall were all aglow. The controller at UNACMA in New York gave me the go sign then, and I said shakily, "This is Dr. Robert Mitchell at UNACMEA Wags, Wisconsin, USA. A strange phenomenon occurred here at 08:22 hours today." I paused, disconcerted by background voices translating my words into dozens of foreign tongues. Then, steeling myself, I went on, concluding with a question. "Is Miss Shoner present at this moment in any one of your installations?" There were no's, nons, niets, nines, and then a hesitant oui, followed almost immediately by a resounding da. My eyes went to the Siberian monitor, and Elaine was suddenly facing me on the screen, saying, "Doc, I'm in a lab in Russia, and there's not a soul here who can speak English, just a bunch of leering old bearded men. I'm scared, Doc, and—" She wasn't there. Sosnowski's voice came from Hanford. "She's here now, Bob. I cut the AGS out and then back in, and bingo." Elaine was behind him, sporting a Cossack hat. "Elaine, I started, and stopped. She wasn't there. "Du bist wunderschön," a guttural voice proclaimed. I swung to the Munich monitor. I didn't need a translation. Elaine was there and making an impression. She swapped the Cossack hat for a Tyrolean one with a grinning Bavarian had been wearing, and vanished. "Elle est ici," a nasal tenor said. "C'est la Sorbonne où elle est. C'est le beau qui parle, ma foi. Elle est vraiment magnifique. Mon Dieu, elle est ne plus." Though sadly neglected since college days, my knowledge of French told me that Elaine had arrived, conquered, and departed, leaving Monsieur Dubois of the Paris AGS in a state of bemusement indeed. "Fellows," I cried, "someone's not playing fair. In the last few minutes, Miss Shoner has been in Siberia, in Hanford, Washington, USA, in Munich, Germany, and in Paris. This—" "She's back again," Sosnowski cried from Hanford. I swung to the Hanford screen. "Ted," I said, "stop switching the AGS off and on. It could be dangerous. The Gauss level might even bring her to critical mass. You're playing with something we know little about." Sosnowski rolled his eyes from the screen to Elaine. "Brother," he said, "this girl's always near critical mass, and I'm not playing. I'd be happy if she'd stay right here." But she wasn't there. "Ona Dyevitza," a jubilant voice said. The Siberia screen displayed a Russian doing the saber dance before Elaine's eyes, and an interpreter somewhere in the vast UNACMA network was helpfully murmuring, "She is beautiful." At which point Monsieur Dubois said throatily to an abruptly materialized vision, "Tu es belle, reste ici, ma chère," and then swore with Gallic fluency as thin air alone vibrated to his impassioned words. While Al Benson at Phoenix began a John Alden speech in my behalf. I was silent, studying Elaine's lovely face as Al spoke to her. She was apparently enjoying every second of her fantastic flitting, yet I could see perplexity deep in her dark eyes. I thought I could see a bewilderment, a lostness. "Al," I said, "I've got to talk to her." Was it wishful thinking, or did I see a warmth leap into her face as she turned to see my image? "Trust in me, Elaine," I said. "I'll bring you home." "Home?" she asked. "Yes, home." "Home to me," I said, naked longing in my voice, and for all the world to hear, "I love you, darling." "Moi aussi," Monsieur Dubois mewed in French. "Ich auch," came from Munich, plus "Bitte, komme doch bald zurück," which I gathered was asking her to come back, but quickly. "I mean it," I cried through Babel. My voice was lost in a storm of pleas, protestations, proposal, propositions, presentations, and plain PhD philanderings, during which Elaine's loveliness appeared briefly on the monitor screens for Paris, Leeds, Brussels, Hanford, Stockholm, Paris, Hanford, Phoenix, Munich, Hanford, Atomsk, Tokyo, Hanford, Madrid, Paris, Hanford, Paris, Hanford, Paris, Hanford. "Sosnowski," I cried, "and you too, Monsieur Dubois, stop! Arrêtez! Do not do it any more! Ne faites-le plus!" The situation continued to ping-pong. Hanford to Paris, to Hanford to Paris. Sosnowski said, while Monsieur Dubois was ardently proposing to Elaine at the Sorbonne, "I sincerely wish to marry the girl, Bob." "So do I, Ted," I answered him. "May the better man—" "The best man," he snapped back. "Don't forget Dubois." I cut my microphone and said quickly to Herman, "George, get the chaplain and get the mayor to bring over whatever personnel and forms it takes to get a marriage license. And move!" And a Russian roared from the Siberia monitor something that sounded like "Mogyuya-znitsny-vaji-dochidi," which, promptly interpreted by a linguist on the network, resulted in, "May I marry your daughter?" I didn't burn. I blazed. My daughter, indeed. So my hair is greying. Prematurely, that is. I'm only 29. I was in control of Unakmir at that moment. Full control. I was vested with UN power, and that's power these days, despite the snide remarks you hear from certain quarters. "Look," I said to the whole wide world, "you will all, repeat, all, immediately deactivate every AGS unit. This is a direct order of the UN." I was hopeful, but Monsieur Dubois said it was an accident. Sosnowski said he couldn't figure out how it happened that the Hanford AGS reactivated itself. And a new and properly British voice said, "This is Gibraltar. I say, Miss Shona is here. It was, I assure you, quite accidental. One of your flyboys is here to pick up a cargo of potables for your North African bases and mistook the AGS button for an intercom and—" "This is Sosnowski. I'm sorry, but—" And an interpreter cut in. "Commissar Vladislav indicates that he will allow Miss Shona to return if monitoring of the Soviet AGS installations will be permanently discontinued." "Gibraltar here. I'm rather afraid your pilot is somewhat out of hand." "Mein Liebling, kannst du nicht länger hier bleiben?" "Ma chère, reste avec moi, je te donne un monde." "Elaine," I cried, "wherever you are, answer me." At last, at long last, her voice said, "Yes, Bob." "Will you marry me?" I asked prayerfully, and Munich got into the act with, "Willst du nicht mich heiraten?" "Yes," she said so softly I barely heard. I swung a frantic glance over my shoulder. His Honour the Mayor of Racine and subalterns were behind me. "Elaine!" I yelled. "Whoops!" she said then. "I'm back at Hanford." "Sosnowski," I said sharply, "you heard my order. You will not activate the AGS again."
I haven't been touching it for the last 10 minutes, Sosnowski said. There's something wrong with the activator. It's turning itself off and on at random. Then get a technician and damp the pile. I'll do what I can, he said. Anyway, Elaine's gone. Siberia was back in the act. Then Gibraltar. Then Munich. Elaine, I cried. You're coming home now. I cut the AGS, then reactivated it, and she was here. Oh, so wondrously close to me. And the mayor handed her a pen, and she signed the marriage license, and... Sosnowski said he was sorry. The chaplain arrived. I refused to mention his name of faith. He asked for anonymity. Suffice it to say that he is a man of God and a man of science. He looked at me questioningly and nodded. The service began. Elaine heard parts of the ceremony at 16 different locations in the world, and my errant colleagues, bless them, despite their playful reactivations of their AGS units, maintained a decent silence when the chaplain made the fateful invitation to that someone to speak now or forever hold his peace. At last the chaplain said, Do you, Robert, take this woman, there at Hanford on the monitor, to be thy lawful wedded wife? And I said, I do, and hoped I didn't sound facetious as I added, except that she's at Gibraltar now. Do you, Elaine, take this man, Robert? And Al Benson cut in from Phoenix, saying, The computer says to degauss her, Bob. And I snapped on Wags, full power. And Elaine was here beside me, saying, I do, I do, I do. And George Herman, bless him, had degaussing equipment ready. That was 11 months ago. Now I am at the Unakmir Wags console again, and I am asking all the physicists in charge of AGS units throughout the world to listen, to understand, and to help. Flitting between them this morning is our 2-month-old daughter. She inherited a little instability and a high Gauss tolerance. Her mother's had her here at Wags too often, too, I guess. The little one's particularly disturbed now because she needs a change. Will someone please do the necessaries fast? Elaine's here, and she's determined to go too, figuring they'll wind up together, and then, with your cooperation, I can bring them both back. But, fellows, it would be easier if... Elaine!
The End. Subscribe for your daily stories of futures past. And now, for the next story. And Devious, the Line of Duty, by Tom Godwin. Originally published in Analog Science Fact and Fiction, December 1962. Narrated by Tom Trussel. We're almost there, my boy. The big grey-haired man who would be Lieutenant Dale Hunter's superior, Strategic Services Special Agent George Rockford, opened another can of beer, his 5th. There will be intrigue already underway when this helicopter sets down with us. Attempted homicide will soon follow. The former will be meat for me. You will be meat for the latter. Rockford was smiling as he spoke, the genial, engaging smile of a fond old father. But the eyes, surrounded by laughter crinkles, were as unreadable as 2 discs of grey slate. They were the eyes of a poker player, or master conman. I don't understand, sir, Hunter said. Of course not, Rockford agreed. It's 100 light years back to Earth, here on Vesta, to make sure there is an Earth in the future. You're going to do things never dreamed of by your Terran Space Patrol instructors there. You'll be amazed, my boy. Hunter said nothing, but he felt a growing dislike for the condescending Rockford. Only a few weeks ago, President Discar himself had said, For more than a century, these truly valiant men of the Space Patrol have been our unwavering outer guard, have fought and died by legions. that Earth and the other worlds of the Terran Republic might remain free. I suppose you know, Rockford said, that there will be no more than 4 days in which to stop the Verdam oligarchy from achieving its long-time ambition of becoming big enough to swallow the Terran Republic. I know, Hunter answered. Jardine, Vesta's companion world, was the key. Jardine was large and powerful, with a space navy unsurpassed by that of any other single world. A large group of now-neutral worlds would follow Jardine's lead, and Jardine's alliance with the Verdam People's worlds would mean the quick end for the Terran Republic. But if Jardine could be persuaded to ally with the Terran Republic, the spreading, grasping arms of the Verdam octopus would begin to wither away. Rockford spoke again. Val Boran, Jardine's Secretary of Foreign Relations, is the man who will really make Jardine's decision. I know him slightly. Since my public role is that of acting ambassador, he agreed, reluctantly, to come to Vesta so that the talks could be on a neutral world. With him will be Verdam's special envoy, Sonig, a wily little man who has been working on Boran for several weeks. He seems to be succeeding quite well. Here's a message I received from Earth early this morning. Rockford handed him a sheet of the green hyperspace communications paper. The message was in code, with Rockford's scribbled translation beneath. Intelligence reports Verdam forces already massed for attack in Sector A13, in full expectation of Jardine's alliance. Anti-Terran propaganda, stressing the new Jardine incident being used in preparation for what will be their claim of defensive action to protect innocent worlds from Terran aggression. Terran forces will be outnumbered 5-1. The urgent necessity of immediate and conclusive countermeasures by you on Vesta is obvious. Hunter handed the paper back, thinking, It's worse than any of us thought, and wondering how Supreme Command could ever have entrusted such an important task to a beer-guzzling old man from Strategic Service, a branch so unknown that he had never even heard of it until his briefing the day before he left Earth. He saw that they had left the desert behind and were going up the long slope of a mountain. "The meeting will be on this mountain?" he asked. Rockford nodded. "The rustic royal retreat. Princess Lila will be our hostess. Her mother and father were killed in an airplane accident a year ago, and she was the only child. You will also get to meet Lord Narf of the Sea Islands, her husband by proxy, who regards himself as a rare combination of irresistible woman-killer and rugged man among men." "Husband by proxy?" Hunter asked. "The king worshipped his daughter, and his dying request to her was that she promise to marry Lord Narf. Narf's father had been the king's closest friend, and the king was sure that his old friend's son would always love and care for Lila. Lila dutifully, at once, married Narf by proxy, which is like a legally binding formal engagement under Western law. 4 days from now, the time limit is up, and they'll be formally married, unless she should do the unprecedented thing of renouncing the proxy marriage." Rockford drained the last of the beer from the can. "Those are the characters involved in our play. I have a plan. That's why I told Space Patrol to send me a brand new second lieutenant, young, strong, fairly handsome, and expendable. I hope you can be philosophical about the latter." "Sir," Hunter said, unable to keep a touch of stiffness out of his tone, "it is not exactly unknown in the Space Patrol for a man to die in the line of duty." "Ah, yes." Rockford was regarding him with disturbing amusement. "You are thinking, of course, of dying dramatically behind a pair of blazing blasters. But you will soon learn, my boy, that a soldier's duty is to protect the worlds he represents by whatever actions will produce the best results, no matter how unheroic those actions may be." "Attention, please." It was the voice of the pilot. "We are now going to land." Hunter preceded Rockford out of the helicopter and onto the green grass of a small valley, across which tall, red-trunked cloud trees were scattered. Pale grey ghost trees, with knobby, twisted limbs, grew thickly among the cloud trees. There was a group of rustic cabins, connected by gravel paths, and a much larger building which he assumed would be a meeting hall. "Hello." He turned and looked into the brown eyes of a girl. Her green skirt and orange blouse made a gay splash of colour. Her red-brown hair was wind-tumbled and care-free about her shoulders. In her hand was a bouquet of bright spring flowers. But there was no smile of spring in the dark eyes, and the snub-nosed little face was solemn and old beyond its years. "You're Lieutenant Hunter, aren't you?" she asked in the same low, quiet voice. "Princess Lila!" There seemed to be genuine delight in Rockford's greeting as he hurried over. "You're looking more like a queen every day." Her face lighted with a smile, making it suddenly young and beautiful. "I'm so glad to see you again, George." "Ah, good afternoon." The voice was loud, unpleasantly gravelly. They turned, and Hunter saw a tall, angular man of perhaps 40, whose pseudo-genial smile was not compatible with his sour, square-jawed face and calculating little eyes. He spoke to Rockford. "You're Ambassador Rockford? Here to represent the Terran Republic, I believe." He jerked his head toward Princess Lila, who was no longer smiling. "My wife, Princess Lila." "Oh, she and I have been friends since he was 10, Lord Narf." "And this young man," Narf glanced at Hunter, "is your aide, I presume? Lila, did you think to send anyone after their luggage?" A servant was already carrying the luggage and cases of Rockford's beer out of the helicopter. Hunter followed the others toward the cabins. Narf, in the lead, was saying, "Ridiculously primitive here, now, but I'm having some decent furniture and well-trained servants sent up from my Sea Island estates." The cabin was large and very comfortable, as Rockford mentioned to Princess Lila. "I'm glad you like it," she said. "Val Boran and Envoy Sonig are already here, and we'll meet for dinner in the central hall. I thought that if we all got acquainted in a friendly atmosphere like that, it might help a lot to—" "That reminds me," Narf glanced at his watch. "I promised this Boran he could have a discussion with me. Vesta Jardine tariff policies. I suppose he's already waiting. Come on, Lila. It will do you no harm to listen and learn a bit about interplanetary business." For a long moment she looked at Narf silently, her eyes thoughtful. Then she said to Rockford, "If you will excuse us, please, and be prepared for Alonso to come bounding in the minute he learns you're here." She walked beside Narf to the door and out it, the top of her dark hair coming just even with his shoulder. "And that," Rockford said as he settled down in the largest, softest chair, "was King-to-be Narf, whose business ability is such that all his inherited Sea Island estates are gone, but the one Lila saved for him, and who owes a total of 10 million monetary units to everyone from call girls to yacht builders." "And she is going to marry him?" Hunter asked. "Marry that jackass and let him bankrupt her kingdom?" Rockford shrugged. "You may have noticed that she doesn't look the least bit happy about it, but she is a very conscientious young lady who regards it as her most solemn duty to keep the promise she made to her father. For her, there is no escape." "But your first duty will be to cultivate a friendship with her. I'm going to use her and you to get what I want." "Use us?" "Yes. One of the most rigid requirements of a strategic serviceman's character is that he be completely without one." Rockford was asleep in his chair an hour later, 3 empty beer cans beside him. Hunter watched him, his doubt of Rockford's competence growing into a conviction. Rockford had spoken knowingly of his plan, and had done nothing but drink more beer. Now he was asleep, while time, so limited and precious, went by. He hadn't even bothered to reply to Hunter's suggestion that perhaps he should call on Val Boren and counteract some of Envoy Sonig's anti-Terran propaganda. Hunter came to a decision. If Rockford was still doing nothing when morning came, he would send an urgent message to Supreme Command. He went outside to find a servant and learn how mail was handled. "Look out!" Gravel flew as overgrown feet tried to stop, and something like a huge black dog lunged headlong around the corner and into his legs. He went to the ground head first over the animal, acutely aware as he went down of the fascinated interest on the face of the not-so-distant servant. "I'm sorry, Lieutenant." He got up to look down at the dog-like animal. There was a concerned expression in its brown eyes and an apologetic grin on its face. He recognized it as one of the natives of the grim starvation world of Altair 4. The Altarians had emigrated to all sections of the galaxy to earn a living in whatever humble capacity they could fill. Many were empathic. "I ran too fast to meet, Mr. Rockford, I guess. Are you hurt, Lieutenant?" He pulled a cloud tree needle out of his hand and looked grimly down into the furry face. "In the future, try to look where you're going." "Oh, I look all right. I just not see. My name is Alonso, Lieutenant, and I stay here all the time and guard everything for Princess Ryra. I pleased to meet you, and I will run errands for you, and do things like mail your letters for candy or cookies, which I are not supposed to eat much of, but Princess Ryra say not too many will hurt me." "Mail letters?" Hunter's animosity vanished. "I'm sorry I was rude, Alonso. All my fault. I may write a letter to my dear old mother tonight, and if you would mail it for me in the morning—" Rockford left ahead of Hunter, and it was a minute past the appointed time when Hunter reached the meeting hall. He heard Narf's loud voice inside. "Boren must have stopped to watch the sunset. Told him I wanted everyone here on time." The low voice of Lila said something, and Narf said, "Not necessary for you to defend him, my dear. I made it plain to him." A new voice spoke from behind Hunter. "It seems I have annoyed Lord Narf." He was a tall, black-eyed man, with the dark, saturnine face of an Indian. There was a strange, indefinable air of sadness about him which reminded Hunter of the sombre little Princess Lila. "You're Val Boren, sir," he said. "I'm Lieutenant Hunter." Inside, Narf sat at the head of the table. On his left was Lila, then Rockford. On his right was a spidery little man of about 50, his slick back hair so tight against his skull that it gave his head the appearance of a weasel's. His lips were paper-thin under a long nose, like those of a dry and selfish old maid, but the round little eyes darting behind thick glasses were cold and shrewd, and missed nothing. He would be Verdum's special envoy Sonig. Hunter praised him as a man very dangerous in his own deceptive way. A servant showed them to their places at the table. Rockford and Val Boren exchanged greetings. The moment everyone was seated, Narf said, "Dinner tonight, Will?" "Excuse me," Lila said, "but Mr. Sonig hasn't yet met." "Oh, the young fellow there," Narf gestured with his hand. "Rockford's aide. Now, ring the chime, Lila. Those forest stag states are already getting cold. I killed the beast myself, gentlemen, just this morning. A long-range running shot that required a bit more than luck." The dinner was excellent, but no one seemed to notice. Narf was absorbed in the story of his swift rise to eminence in the Vestran Space Guard. There were humorous incidents. "Can't understand why, but I seem to attract women like a magnet. I'm strictly the masculine type of male, and I approve of this, but it can be a blasted nuisance when you're an ensign going up fast and your commander finds one of your blondes stowed away in your compartment." and there were scenes of tense drama. "Made a boyhood vow that I'd never settle for anything less than to always be a man among men. Seemed to have succeeded rather well. When I saw the crew was almost to the snapping point from battle tension, I knew that as commander I'd have to set the example that would inspire." Hunter recalled Rockford's words of a few hours before. "Narf got to be commander, finally, but only because he was the son of the king's best friend. His record is very mediocre." Princess Lila tried 3 times to start a conversation of general interest and was drowned out by Narf each time. Sonig's pretense of being spellbound by Narf's stories was belied by the way his eyes kept darting from Rockford to Val Boran. Val's own attention kept shifting from Narf to the silent Lila, whose downcast eyes betrayed her discouragement. She watched Val from under her eyelashes, to look away whenever their eyes met, and Hunter wondered if she was ashamed because Narf had given Sonig the seat of honor that should have belonged to Val. Of course, Narf's own position at the head of the table was actually Lila's. "So there was no substitute for competent, unwavering leadership," Narf was saying. "Received a citation for that one." Sonig nodded appreciatively. "Your military record well illustrates the fact that the tensions of danger and battle can bring forth in a competent leader the highest kind of courage. But it seems to me that these same circumstances, if the leader is frightened or incompetent, can easily produce hysterical actions with disastrous consequences. Is this true, your lordship?" Rockford was watching Sonig intently, and Hunter saw that there was an eager anticipation in Sonig's manner. "You are quite right," Narf answered. "I've always had the ability to remain cool in any crisis. Very important. Let a commander get rattled, and he may give any kind of an order, like the New Jardine incident." A frozen silence followed the last 5 words. Hunter thought, so that's what the little weasel was fishing for. Rockford quietly laid down his fork. Val's face turned grim. Lila looked up in quick alarm and said to Narf, "Let's not—" "Don't misunderstand me, gentlemen," Narf's loud voice went on. "I believe the commander of the Terran cruiser wouldn't have ordered it to fire upon the Vadam cruiser over a neutral world such as New Jardine if he had been his rational self. Cold War battle nerves. So he shot down the Vadam cruiser, and its nuclear converters exploded when it fell in the center of Colony City. Force of a hydrogen bomb. 40,000 innocent people gone in a microsecond. Not the commander's fault, really. The fault of the military system that failed to screen out its unstable officers." "Yes, your lordship. But is it possible," Sonig spoke very thoughtfully, "for a political power, which is of such a nature that it must have a huge military force to maintain its existence, to thoroughly screen all its officers? So many officers are required. Can there ever be any assurance that such tragedies won't occur again and again until a majority of worlds combine in demanding an end to aggression and war?" Rockford spoke to the grim Val. "I know, sir, that your sister was among the lost in Colony City. I am sorry. For the benefit of Mr. Sonig and Lord Narf, I would like to mention that the Vadam cruiser fired upon the Terran cruiser over neutral New Jardine in open violation of galactic rule. An atmospheric feedback of the Vadam cruiser's own space blasters tore out its side and caused it to fall. The Terran cruiser never fired." "But, Mr. Rockford," Sonig spoke very courteously, "isn't it true that certain safety devices prevent atmospheric feedback?" "They do, unless accidentally or purposely disconnected." Sonig raised his eyebrows. "You imply a created incident, sir?" "It doesn't matter," Val Boran said. His tone was as grim as his face, and it was obvious he did not believe Rockford's explanation. Colony City is a field of fused glass now. Its people are gone, and no amount of debating can ever bring them back. The dismal dinner was finally over. Rockford stopped outside the door of their cabin to fill and light his pipe. "It was a profitable evening," he said to Hunter. "I can start planning in detail now, after a little beer, that is." "He'll go to sleep after he drinks his beer," Hunter thought, "and there will never be any plan unless I—" Soft footsteps came up the path behind them. It was Princess Lila.
"I want to apologize," she said. "I just told Mr. Boren, the same thing."
Her face was a pale oval in the starlight, her eyes dark shadows.
"I'm sorry my husband mentioned the New Jardine incident."
"That's all right, Lila," Rockford said. "No harm was done."
"He's an ex-military man, and I guess it's his nature to be more forthright than tactful."
"You certainly can't condemn him for that," Rockford said. "In fact, he's an extraordinary teller of entertaining stories. It was a most enjoyable evening." "And in a way it was," Rockford said when she was gone, and they were in the cabin. He was seated in the softest chair, a can of beer in his hand, as usual. Hunter thought of the way she had looked in the starlight, and said, "Why did she let that windbag sit at the head of the table and ruin the meeting that she had arranged?" "He'll soon be her husband. I suppose she feels she should be loyal to him." But what?" "Nothing. It's none of my business." "Oh?" Rockford smiled in a way Hunter did not like. "You think so, eh?" Hunter changed the subject. "Are you going to start talking to Boren and undo the damage Narf and Sonic have done?" "It would be a waste of time, my boy. Val Boren's mind is already made up." "Then what are you going to do?" "Drink 6 cans of beer and go to sleep." "I thought you had a plan." "I have a most excellent plan." "What is it?" "You'd scream like a banshee if you knew. You'll learn, if you manage to live that long." Rockford was sound asleep an hour later, snoring gently. Hunter sat thinking, hearing the steady murmur of a voice coming from Val Boren's cabin. Sonic's voice, using every means of persuasion he could think of at the moment, capitalizing on the New Jardine incident and Boren's withheld grief over the sister he had lost. And the Terran Republic's representative was sprawled, fat and mindless in a fog of beer fumes. Hunter hesitated no longer. The fate of Earth and the Terran Republic hung in the balance, and time was desperately limited, if there was now any time at all. He took paper and pen and began the urgent message to Supreme Command, headed Top Emergency. It would be sent via hyperspace communications from the city and would span the 100 light-years within seconds. He was up before Rockford the next morning and went out into the bright sunlight. He looked hopefully for Alonso, not wanting to be seen mailing the letter in person. Rockford, despite his drunken stupors, could be shrewdly observant, and he might deduce the contents of the letter before Supreme Command ever received it. He was some distance from the cabin when he heard the pound of padded feet behind him. "Lieutenant!" Alonso had the grin of a genial canine idiot. "Do you want me to mail your letter to your dead old mother?" "Yes, I have the letter right here." "Okay, I got to hurry because the mail helicopter leaves right away. I charge 6 fig cookies or 3 candy bars or—" "Here, take it and run. And try not to slobber all over it." They were served breakfast in the cabin. Afterward, Rockford went for a brief talk with Princess Lila. He came back and settled down in the easy-chair, his pipe in his hand. "Your morning's duty won't be at all unpleasant," he said. "The obnoxious and repulsive things will begin to happen to you later, maybe this afternoon." "What do you mean?" This morning you will go for a walk with Princess Lila and discuss changing the Western Space Guard into a force along Terran Space Patrol lines. Narf is still in bed, by the way." Rockford added, "I'll give you a bit of sage advice, for your own good. Try not to fall in love with her." Hunter and Princess Lila sat together on the high hill, their backs against the red trunk of a cloud tree. On the mountain slope to their right lay the dark and jungle-like taiga forest. He wondered if it was true that the savage tree tigers never left its borders, while the toy-like cabins of the camp were below them. The mountain slope dropped on down to the desert, beyond which were other mountains, far away and translucent azure. "It was George who suggested we come up here," she said. "He knows I do that often, when the responsibilities of being queen of a world, I'm such an ordinary and untalented person, become too much for me. I always feel better when I sit up here and look down on the mountains and deserts." "Yes," he said politely. "A ruling princess can be so alone," she said. "That's why I appreciate George's friendship so much. It's never because of any ulterior motive, but because he likes me." "I'm going to use her and you to get what I want." He looked at her, at the lines of sadness on the face that was too old for its years, felt the way she was so grateful to Rockford for what was only a cold-blooded pretense of friendship, and the dislike for Rockford increased. He could not force himself to speak civilly of Rockford, so he changed the subject. "I understand you wanted to talk to me about the Space Guard." "Yes. Even a neutral world can't feel safe these days, and George suggested that." "I'll be glad to help all I can. Of course, the change will require time." "I can understand that. They say you Space Patrol officers begin training at 16 after passing almost impossible qualification tests." "The tests can seem extremely difficult to a farm boy from Kansas. Kansas?" Her eyes lighted with interest. "My grandmother was from Kansas. She used to tell me about the green plains of grain in the spring, and how different they were from the deserts of Vesta." It was almost noon when he took her hand and helped her to her feet, realizing guiltily that they had talked all morning without ever getting back to the cold, dry facts of military efficiency. "It was nice to talk up here this morning," she said. She looked down at the cabins, and the shadow fell again across her face. "But nothing down there has been changed by it, has it?" He held to her hand longer than was necessary as they went down the steep part of the hill. She did not seem to mind. When they reached the cabin, she said, "It's still a little while until lunch. Time enough for you to give me a rough outline of the Space Guard change." Everything inside the cabin was feminine. None of Narf's possessions were visible. There was a heavy door leading into Narf's half of the cabin with a massive lock. Hunter worried if it was left unlocked at night, thought of Narf's sour face and leering little eyes, and found the thought repulsive. The answer to his conjecture came with the entrance of a servant as they seated themselves. "By your leave, your highness," the servant said, bowing. "I came to make Lord Narf a key for that inner door." "A key?" There was alarm in her tone. "But we're not married. Not yet." A puzzled expression came to the man's face. "Lord Narf told me, your highness, that you had ordered the duplicate key made and given to him before evening. I found I could not do this without first borrowing your key for a pattern." There was a frightened look in her eyes as they went to the door and back to the servant. "No, don't try to make a key." "Yes, your highness." The servant bowed and turned away. A familiar, gravelly voice spoke from behind them. "Ah, an unscheduled little meeting, I see." It was Narf, anger on his face, already within the doorway as the servant went at it. "We were going to talk about the Space Guard," Lila said in an emotionless tone.
Lieutenant Hunter has promised to show how Space Patrol methods will improve it, and...
By a coincidence, Sonig and I were discussing military matters only a few minutes ago, Narf said. He looked at Hunter. I'm afraid that Sonig and I agree that the Terran Space Guard is quite out of date now. The fighting force of the galaxy is the Verdam's People's Guards. Narf spoke to Lila. You may go ahead and talk with this lieutenant if you wish to, but it is a waste of time. I'm arranging to have Sonig send People's Guards officers here to supervise the rebuilding of the Space Guard. And now, there was insinuation in Narf's tone as he spoke to Hunter, I have to give Sonig a demonstration of my skill with weapons. He insists on it. He has heard of several of my modest feats.
Narf left the door open behind him, so that by turning his head as he walked, he could see the two inside. I suppose I might as well go, Hunter said. Lila did not answer. She sat motionless, staring unseeingly before her, and he wondered if she was thinking of how very soon Narf would be king, and his authority as great as hers. She did not notice when he quietly left the room. Rockford was waiting in the cabin, still in the easy-chair. "Well," Rockford said, "what do you think of her?" Hunter tried to keep the personal dislike out of his coldly formal reply. "If you refer to your suggestion that I not make love to her, sir, I can assure you that such a suggestion was never necessary. I happen to have a code of ethics." "I didn't say make love. I said fall in love. That's quite ethical. Did you complete your discussion with her?" "Well, no." "You must do that this afternoon, then. Can't let anything as important as that be delayed." Hunter stared at him, trying to find one small grain of sanity in Rockford's actions. The Verdam Empire already had Jardine within its grasp, and Vesta, and the end for Earth was inevitable. And Rockford slept and drank beer, and regarded it as very important that the Western Space Guard discussions, of a change that Narf would never permit, be continued without delay. He walked slowly into his own room. In the nightmare situation of frustration there was one single sane and stable conviction for his mind to cling to. Supreme Command would by now have received his message and shot back the reply that would relieve Rockford of his command. Perhaps it wasn't yet too late. Then his mind reeled as a new conviction struck it. There was a sheet of paper on his bed. A message. His message. "Situation extremely critical. Val Boren already convinced by Sonig's propaganda. Must report Rockford is utterly incompetent. His mind and will destroyed by alcohol. Repeat, Rockford is doing nothing. His mind destroyed by alcohol." The words screamed up at him, and he felt the sickness of one who sees the last faint hope shattered and gone. All was lost now. He went outside, feeling a savage desire for violence rising above the sickness. "Lieutenant!" Alonso came bounding to meet him, and slid to a halt with his saucer feet scattering gravel and the idiotic grin on his face. "I made your letter and you owe me 6 fig cook." It occurred to Hunter that it was not Alonso that should be punished. He, Hunter, was the one who deserved execution for ever entrusting anything so important as a message to an imbecilic animal. He said with cold distinctness, "The letter is inside." "Oh?" Alonso blinked. "I sure made something all right, after Mr. Rockford correct it." "Correct it?" "Oh, sure. Mr. Rockford, he up wrong before you this morning to find me and say you are writing a letter last night, and I must bring it by him to make all your mistakes over again." So Rockford was watching all the time, pretending to be in a drunken sleep.
Lieutenant, Alonso shifted his big feet impatiently, you still owe me 6 fig... Hunter swung around and strode away, afraid he might decide to choke the animal after all. A culture of 20 worlds was the same as already destroyed, and he was held in a maddening quagmire of helplessness by a crafty alcoholic and a dog with the mind of a small child. "Ah, my boy!" Rockford came out of the cabin, beaming as though nothing had ever happened. "Look to your left, among those ghost trees. Narf is demonstrating his quick-draw skills to Sonig. Narf is supposed to be a very dangerous man, you know." Hunter looked, and saw Narf whipping up the blunt, ugly spread-beam blaster, known to soldiers as the Coward's Special, because at short range it could not miss and would always cripple and blind a man for life, even though it would not always kill him. Sonig was standing by, nodding his weasel head and smiling in open admiration. "Of course," Rockford said, "Sonig isn't mentioning the needle gun all Vadam envoys carry up their sleeve. He's flattering Narf's ego for a reason. He intends to have Vesta as well as Jardine sewed up for the Vadam Empire when he leaves here." "And so far as I can see," Hunter said coldly, "Sonig never is going to have anything vaguely resembling intelligent resistance to his plans." "Ah, yes, so far as you can see," Rockford agreed amiably. "But you obey my order to take Lila for another walk, and everything will turn out all right. In fact, I'll speak to her about that right now." Hunter stared after Rockford as he walked away. There could be no possible shred of doubt. Rockford was insane. The breeze shifted, and the voice of Narf came. "Certainly no weapon for a timid man, this spread-beam blaster. Have to meet the enemy man to man at close range." "In that respect, too," Sonig said, "you remind me of our great General Paluk. His skill in hand-to-hand combat was something that—" "Lieutenant!" Hunter quivered and steeled himself. "Lieutenant!" Alonso came to a flopping halt beside him. "I tell Princess Rhea, and she say I are bad to be mad at you, so I not mad even if you didn't give me my pay." "Thank you," Hunter said acidly. "I was deeply disturbed by your resentment." "Oh, I know, you don't like me, but I think you not as mean as you act. But Lord Narf, he is. I tell you, he already mad enough to kill you." "What? Lord Narf wants to kill me?" "He know you hold Princess Ryla's hand almost all the way down the hill this morning. Mr. Sonig, he see you, and he run and tell Lord Narf, and Mr. Boran too." "But I was only helping her down the hill." "Lord Narf, he are going to say mean things about it to Princess Ryla too, I know. He are always saying mean things to my Princess Ryla." Alonso sighed, a sound strangely human-like in its sadness. "Who will watch over my Princess Ryla after she marry Lord Narf?" he said. "The first thing to go around here will be that stupid blabbermouth animal that are not worth what it costs to feed it. I think maybe he are afraid that if he ever hit my Princess Ryla, I will kill him." The brown eyes looked up at Hunter, and suddenly they were unlike he had ever seen them. Cold, with deliberate decision. "I will, too." Hunter was still standing by the cabin, thinking of what Alonso had said when Rockford returned. "I also stopped by to see Val Boran," Rockford said. "While you're off with Lila, we'll go to the city. Lila is giving us free access to the Royal Library, and the records of a neutral world carry more weight than anything I could say. Not that it's going to change his mind any, but it will give me a chance to work on him in another way." Rockford went into the cabin as Val Boran came up the path, Princess Lila walking beside him. She was saying, "And anything we have in the library is yours for the asking." They were close enough for Hunter to see her expression as she looked up at Val, and added with what seemed a touch of wistfulness, "I'll be glad to go in with you and Mr. Rockford and do what I can to help if you want me to." Lila! It was the grating voice of Narf, who seemed to have the ability to materialize anyway. I'm sure the man knows his business. Besides, I want to talk to you about something as soon as I have finished my discussion with Mr. Sonig. With that, Narf started on toward his cabin. Sonig, close behind him, paused long enough to bow to Lila and say with a meaningless smile, "Good afternoon, Princess Lila. Your husband was just demonstrating his marvelous skill with weapons. I would very much dislike—" the little eyes darted to Hunter and back again, "being the man who aroused his lordship's wrath." Then Sonig followed Narf with one last flickering glance at Hunter to see how the remark had fallen. Rockford came out of the cabin with his briefcase and said to Val, "Are we ready to go?"
"I just told Val," Lila spoke quickly, "that I would be glad to go along and help any way I can."
The words were addressed to Rockford, but her eyes were on Val with the same wistful expression.
"Do you want me to?"
Val answered her with cool, formal courtesy. "The librarian can find all the records we will need, Princess Lila, without our interrupting your schedule for the day or your discussion with your husband. Thank you very much." For an instant Lila's face had the hurt expression of a child rebuffed without reason. Then she looked away, and Val turned to Rockford and said, "I'm ready when you are, sir." Lila watched them walk away, and she was still watching when the helicopter had lifted into the air and faded from sight. Hunter hesitated, then spoke to her. "I understand you want to talk more about the Space Guard, Princess Lila."
"Princess Lila."
Her lips curled as she turned to face him, and she seemed to spit the words at him in sudden, unexpected resentment.
"I love the meaningless sound of my official figurehead title. It's so much better than being regarded as a living person with feelings that can be hurt."
"But he floundered, not quite sure what had caused her reaction. She made a visible effort to compose herself.
"I'm sorry," she said. "I suppose my husband is quite right. An immature female has no business trying to rule a world, and the sooner the marriage is confirmed, the sooner a competent man can take over the job."
"No," he said. "I think—" He decided that what he thought had better be left unsaid.
She looked toward the cabin she shared with Narf. "Let you know when we can talk."
She went back toward the cabin, walking slowly. From inside Narf's half of it came the sound of Narf's voice as he spoke to Sonig.
"Of course, this collection of heads is nothing compared with what I have in the Sea Islands, but some interesting stories here. Take that snow fox there."
Hunter sighed and saw that Lila had stopped before her door, as though dreading to enter. Narf's voice droned on.
"Only wounded, so I finished it with a knife. Even with its heart half cut out, it still wanted to live. Beautiful pelt. Coat for Janely, the striptease queen. Always had her way with women. Lila could tell you that. Had my pick of hundreds, but I'm letting her be my choice."
He saw Lila half lift her hand, as if in some mute gesture of protest. Then she turned and walked swiftly away, up the path that led into the ghost trees, and out of sight. He waited, but she did not come back. He went into his cabin and moved about restlessly, hearing again Narf's sadism and sex boasting, and seeing again how she turned and almost ran from it.
"Lieutenant!"
Alonso was panting, a look of frantic appeal in his eyes.
"Please help me! Princess Lila! She will die!"
He felt his heart lurch. "She's hurt?" he demanded, and was already on his way to the door.
"She are about to cry, and she are going to where the tree tigers live. They will kill her. Please come with me."
He asked no more questions, but went out the door and up the path, Alonso running ahead of him. The ghost trees grew thinner as they went up the mountain slope,
and the blue-green fern-like trees of the tiger forest began to appear. They grew thicker and thicker, until the ground was black with their shadows, and the midday sunlight was filtered out by the foliage overhead. Alonso was trailing her, his nose to the ground, and Hunter hurried close behind him, watching for the red and white of the clothes she was wearing, and hoping they would not find her too late. They were deep in the forest when they found her. She was standing motionless in the center of a clearing, facing away from him, and looking as small and alone as a lost child. She seemed to be waiting. He realized for the first time how alone she really was, with only a dog-like alien, Alonso, to love her or care what might happen to her, and with a future she could not bear to face. But Rockford had been wrong when he had said, "For her there is no escape." There was escape for her. She had only to wait, as she was waiting now, and it would come in the wind-like whispers of a tiger's rush through the grass behind her. He hurried to her. She turned, and he saw the stains of tears now dry on her face, and in her eyes the darkness of utter defeat. "I was afraid you might get hurt, Lila." Then, seemingly without volition on his part, he put his arms around her, and she was clinging to him and crying in muffled sobs, and trying to say something about, "I didn't think anybody cared." It was some time later, when her crying was finished, that he was reminded of the tigers by Alonso. "Lieutenant, all the time, some tigers are coming closer and closer. We'd better get her out of here, Lieutenant, before they find us." Lila looked down at Alonso. "Thank you, Alonso, for watching over me and... Her voice caught, and she dropped to her knees and hugged the shaggy head tight against her. Hunter watched ahead, Lila beside him as they went through the dense trees. Alonso walked soft-footed behind them, watching the rear. When they came to the first ghost trees and the dwindling of the tiger trees, Hunter thought it safe to walk slower and talk to her. "I saw you go," he said. "I didn't know where until Alonso came running to tell me." "I heard him bragging about killing, and about his women. I was weak, wasn't I?" "Weak?" "I was afraid to face the future, just because it isn't to be exactly like I thought I wanted." "What was the kind you wanted, Lila?" "Oh, I guess I wanted a husband who could see me only, and children, and evenings together in the flower garden, and, well, all the silly sentimental little things that mean so much to a woman." He thought, even with its heart half cut out, it still wanted to live. Coat for Janilee, the striptease queen. They passed through the last of the tiger trees, and she said, "We're safe now. The tigers never attack anyone outside their forest." She was walking slowly, and he said, "We should get on back before you missed, shouldn't we?" "Who would miss me?" she asked. "So long as I remain physically intact for the marriage night, who cares where or why I went away?" There was the cold bleakness of winter in her eyes as she spoke, and in her voice the first undertone of brass. He saw that this was already the beginning of the change that Narf would make in her, the transformation of a girl young and wanting to love and be loved into a hard and cynical woman. He put his arm around her shoulder, thinking that he should tell her that he cared and that she must never let Narf change her. "Lila, He realized how futile and foolish the words would sound. She would marry Narf. He would return to Earth, and they would never meet again. There were no words for him to speak on this last walk together, no way to tell her that he wanted to help her, to protect and care for her, no way to express the feeling inside him. He did what seemed as natural under the circumstances as it had been for him to put his arm around her in the clearing. He tilted up her face,
and bent his head to kiss her, and walked with jarring impact into the knobby elbow of a ghost tree limb. The sun was down, and dusk was darkening the camp when they arrived back at her cabin.
"Thank you, Dale," she said. Her hands squeezed his arm. "I didn't know I had a friend, but now we'll have to be strangers because—"
Gravel crunched loudly on one of the paths in the ghost trees, and they looked back to see Narf and Sonnig coming, walking swiftly. Even at the distance there was anger like a red aura about Narf.
"Well," Lila said softly, "here comes my medicine."
Sonnig stopped at his own cabin, to stand just within the doorway, watching. Narf strode on, and stopped before Hunter and Lila, his face twisted with savage hatred as he looked at Hunter. He spoke to Lila with grating vehemence. "You've done an excellent job of making an ass of yourself, and of me, haven't you? Come on in the cabin." Narf seized her by the arm, towering over her as he jerked her around toward the door. Hunter stepped quickly forward, feeling the hot flash of his own anger, but there was the paleness of Lila's face as she looked back, an appeal on it that said, "No." He stopped, realizing that Narf would not physically harm the woman who would make him king of Vesta, and that any interference on his part would only make everything the harder for her. He watched the two go into the cabin, into Lila's half, and Narf slammed the door shut behind them. There followed the quick bang of windows being closed, and then Narf's muffled tirade began. "May think I'm a fool. I'm going to tell you a few things." Sonnig was still standing within his doorway. Hunter knew, without seeing it, that the thin-lipped smile would be on Sonnig's face. He turned and walked back to his own cabin. There was nothing he could do but withdraw, and listen from a distance, and be ready to act if it seemed she was in danger. He sat on his doorstep in the darkness, hearing occasional phrases in Narf's unrelenting abuse. One was, "So prim you had to countermand my order for a key to that lock. Then you went out to play with that second lieutenant." Alonzo materialized out of the darkness, coming as silently as a shadow. He was no longer the bumbling clown. The idiotic grin was gone, and his eyes were green fire, slanted and cat-like, his teeth flashing white in a snarl as he looked back toward the sound of Narf's voice. "She had my Princess Ryda," Alonzo said. "He had cursing her. If he ever hurt her, I will tear out his throat and his river." "He won't hurt her, Alonzo," Hunter said, wishing he could be sure. "He'll only use words on her." "He never asked her why she ran away. He only cursed her and threatened her because she embarrassed him." "Embarrass him?" "He and Sonnig. They see you coming out of the forest with your arm around her. They watch with high-powered glasses." "But there was nothing wrong in that." "They are what Princess Ryra say. She say you only put your arm around her because she are still scared of the tigers. And then he say, 'What about the other?' And he called her awful bad names." "What other?" "Oh, when you are bending down to kiss Princess Ryra and are working into tree." He gulped. "They saw that?" "Oh, sure. Lord Narf are so mad he want to kill you right then. But Sonnig say, 'Wait, I have a plan.' Then Sonnig say, 'It are too bad we don't have a camera. We could have made that lieutenant the laughing stock of 40 worlds." The thought made Hunter gulp again. "What was Sonnig's plan that Narf told Lila about?" he asked. "Oh, he not tell her. I hear Sonnig tell Lord Dwarf when I spy. Sonnig say, 'Tomorrow we be friendly, and we let those two go for another work in the woods. Then we have cameras with telescope lens, and then they kiss and hug. We take moving pictures.'" "Why, the gutter-bred rat." "And Lord Narf say, 'That is what we will do.
And then I will kill him as soon as we have the pictures, and she will have to toe the mark from then on, because if I publicly show the pictures of what she did, she will be ashamed to show her face anywhere on Vesta. Why, he could not think of a suitable expression. And then Sonnig say, to make sure she go out tomorrow, you bore her out good, so she will want to cry on the lieutenant's shoulder again. And Lord Narf say, I will be very glad to tell the two-timing hussy what I think of her. Don't worry. Why, she was only a scared girl, and that rat thinks she... Your promise to your dying father, Narf's voice came in accusation. He's gone now, and you can betray him too. Why don't you go all the way in your deceptions? Your father will never know. Alonso said, I think I go back and stay closer to her cabin, Lieutenant. It was an hour later, and Narf's voice had settled to a low, steady growling, when Hunter heard a helicopter settle down near the camp. A minute later, Val Boren was outlined momentarily in the doorway of the cabin he shared with Sonnig. There followed the exchange of a few words, interrogation in Val's tone, and then the sound of Sonnig's voice alone, which continued for minute after minute. Sonnig is telling him all about it, Hunter thought, including my walking into that tree, but there won't be one word in sympathy with Lila. Sonnig's story ended, and Hunter saw Val leave the cabin. He came straight up the path toward Hunter, looming tall in the darkness as he stopped before him. There was the pale gleam of metal in Val's belt. A blaster. His voice came cold and flat. I want to talk to you, Lieutenant. Hunter sighed, thinking, I suppose he wants to kill me too. He got up and said, We'll go inside. Shut the door behind you. I don't want your friend straining his ears to hear us. Val sat tall, even in the chair, his face like a carving in a dark granite, and his eyes as bright and hard. I understand that you took Princess Lila into the tiger forest today. Val's hand was very near the blaster. I understand you then played the role of affectionate rescuer. Do you believe that story? Hunter asked. Do you have a different one? You might ask Lila, or Alonso. Alonso is the one who came to me for help when he saw that she was going out to die. To die? A startled expression came into the black eyes. She wanted to die? I'll tell you what happened, Hunter said, and told him the story, omitting only the embarrassing kissing incident and knowing that Sonnig had not. Val was silent for a while after Hunter finished speaking. Then he said, It isn't for me to comment upon Lord Narf's character or actions. She is his wife by her own choice, but the thought of someone else taking her out and... I know, it wasn't so. Then Hunter added, You think a great deal of her, don't you? Val's face hardened, and Hunter thought he would not answer. Then he smiled a little, even though without humour, and said, Since I came here to kill you, if I thought you deserved it, I suppose I am obligated to answer your question. My regard for Princess Lila is a respectful one that any civilized man would have for another man's wife. There was an unintended implication in the statement, and Hunter made a conjecture. You and Princess Lila were engaged. How long ago? There was surprise on Val's face, and something like pain quickly masked. So she's already making it public information? No, I learned it from other sources. I don't know, of course, why you persuaded her to break the engagement. That's none of my business anyway. No, Val said, it's none of your business. I'll tell you this, I didn't ask her to break the engagement, but so long as that was what she wanted, I certainly wasn't going to beg her to change her mind. Val stood up to go. If you don't mind, I would rather you said nothing to Princess Lila about this visit tonight. I'm afraid my misplaced surge of chivalry would make me look like a fool to her. Then, as an afterthought, Val added, Mr. Rochford had further business in the city. It was late when Narf finally left Lila's part of the cabin. He went to the cabin occupied by Val and Sonnig, aroused Sonnig, and the two of them went to the helicopter field. Hunter heard the helicopter leaving for the city a few minutes later. Val's cabin remained dark, and after a while the light in Lila's cabin went out. He went to bed, but not to sleep. Over and over, a lonely little Princess Lila clung to him for comfort, crying, while he held her close. He twisted and turned restlessly as he thought of the hours she had sat alone and unloved while Narf poured out his hatred and fury on her. There was a yearning for her, a desire to hold her and always protect her, that would not let him sleep. And he realized the reason why. He thought miserably, "I'm in love with her." Rochford was in bed, snoring loudly, with 6 empty beer cans on the floor beside him, when Hunter got up. He went outside and found Alonzo waiting for him. "They got it all planned to kill you for sure today, Lieutenant." "How?" he asked. "Last night, Rodnarf and Sonnig go to the city, and Rodnarf, he hired 4 bad-looking men with brasters, and Sonnig hired 4 more that are his countrymen, and they bring these men back, and now they are hiding in the woods. And they also bring back movie cameras with telescope lenses. And Rodnarf rough and say he will marry Princess Ryla today before your dead body is even cool." "Oh?" Hunter said. He thought of the snoring Rochford and his words of 2 days before. If you managed to live that long. How, he wondered, could the lazy old drunkard have made such an accurate guess? "And then," Alonzo said, "Rodnarf wake up Princess Ryla. Only I know she wasn't asleep. And he tell her he love her, and have already made all the arrangement for them to get married today, right after lunch. And he tell her she is right about the Space Guard, and she will have until lunch to talk to you about it." There was the sound of Narf's door opening and closing, and Alonzo said, "I go now. Rodnarf might guess that I are telling you things." A few minutes later, Narf and Sonnig came down the path toward Hunter. Both carried pack-sacks, the cameras, of course, and both carried long-range rifle blasters. "Good morning, Lieutenant." Narf was smiling and pseudo-genial again. "About last night? Sometimes a man has to be stern with his wife to impress her. Very foolish thing she did. Might have been killed. I'm afraid I was so badly shaken with worry over her that I didn't even thank you for bringing her back." "A beautiful morning, Lieutenant." Sonnig was smiling, coming as close to beaming as the nature of his face would permit. "Lord Narf is going to take me stag hunting this morning. I'll get some lessons from a master. Did you ever see his lordship's collection of heads? Amazing." "But it seems a sportsman's collection is never quite complete," Narf said. He was still smiling, but the hatred was burning like a fire in his eyes as he looked at Hunter. "There's one more head I must have. I intend to get it this morning." Narf and Sonnig were gone when Lila came out of her cabin, her face pale and drawn. Val came out of his cabin, and the two spoke to each other in greeting. There was a silence, in which neither seemed to know what to say. Finally, awkwardly, Val said, "I heard about yesterday, Lila. Why did you go into the tiger forest?"
"Oh, I was just walking, I guess, and didn't notice where."
"You went there to die, didn't you?"
When you have nothing left."
Then she lifted her head in a proud gesture and said,
"Should it matter to you?"
For a moment Val had the look of a man struck. Then it was gone, and he said in an emotionless voice, "No, I was asking about something that is only your husband's business. I won't do it again." He turned away,
back to his cabin. She took a quick step after him, the proud air gone, and her arms outstretched. "I didn't mean—" He turned back, his tone politely questioning. "Yes?" "I only wanted—" Then her arms dropped, and the life went out of her voice. "What does it matter? What does anything matter?" She hurried into her cabin, and the door closed behind her. Rockford spoke from the doorway behind Hunter. "Well, my boy, are you ready for your day's duties?" He followed Rockford inside, where Rockford settled down in the easy-chair and yawned. "I had a rather busy night," he said. "Certain events occurred yesterday afternoon which forced me to change my own plans to some extent, or to set them ahead a day, I should say." He made an effort to put the vision of Lila from his mind, and asked, "Did you make any progress with Val Boren?" "No, I'm afraid not. Of course, I didn't expect to." Rockford yawned again. "There was another message from Supreme Command. The situation is getting worse, which reminds me of your duty for the day, and the fact that if you can live through it, you will have it made." He's my superior, Hunter thought. He's supposed to outrank a space patrol general, and he's amused by the situation he's here to remedy. "Right now," Rockford said, "Lila faces a grim future and feels like she doesn't have a friend in the world. She needs a shoulder to cry on. You will take her for a walk and supply that shoulder." Somehow, even though the order had nothing to do with the Terran Vadum crisis, he did not have the heart to object. She had been crying before she even reached her door. Later, after he had comforted her, he would demand that Rockford get down to determined effort on the Vadum problem. No more than an hour would be lost by that. "Yes, sir," he said. "But in the interests of Princess Lila's safety, I had better talk to her in her cabin." Alonso saw Narf and Sonic bring back 8. "Professional killers to dispose of you," Rockford finished. "I know all about it, and I know that Narf took time last night to spend an hour with his favourite girlfriend and brag even to her that he was going to marry Lila today before your dead body had time to get cool. But you just take Lila for another walk, and you will cause the beginning of the end for the Vadum people's worlds. You will go down in history, my boy, as the man who saved the Terran Republic." Hunter went out the door, again feeling a feverish sense of unreality. He was to go forth and get blasted into Hamburger, and by some mysterious process known only to Rockford, the Vadum Empire would contritely start collapsing. He did not knock on her door. He did not think of it as a violation of her privacy. She would be feeling too alone and unwanted to care. She was not crying, as he had thought she would be. She was standing by the window, staring down at the grey distant desert, her eyes as bleakly empty as it. "Hello, Lila," he said. "Hello, Dale. I was just thinking. This is the day that I, as a woman, should always have dreamed about." She tried to smile, and failed, and the brass came into her voice. "My wedding day." Alonso told me about it. It seemed to him he should add something, such as to wish her happiness, but such words would be meaningless and farcical, and they would both know it. But there was no reason why he should endanger her by obeying Rockford's insane order. He would not do it. "Ah, good morning, Lila." Rockford loomed in the doorway, jovial as a Santa Claus. "Did you know Dale wants to go for a walk in the woods with you this bright spring morning? And he's no doubt too bashful to tell you so. Do you good to get away from camp?" There was a suggestion of a pause. "While you're still free." He turned a beaming smile on Hunter. "Don't stand there like a dummy, boy. Take her by the arm and let her have a last walk with someone who cares what happens to her." There was one thing about Rockford not compatible with his air of fond fatherliness. His eyes were hard grey slate as they looked into Hunter's, and there was no mistaking their expression. Rochford had not made a fatherly suggestion for his own amusement. He had given an order that he intended to be obeyed. Hunter and Lila walked on through the thickets of ghost trees and arrow brush, each with little to say. Hunter feeling more and more like a ridiculous fool. They had no destination, no purpose in their walk, other than to abide by Rochford's desire that a total of 10 assassins get a chance to slaughter a certain expendable second lieutenant. He did not put his arm around Lila as they walked. If they killed him, it would have to be without their having the satisfaction of the pictures they wanted with which to blackmail her. They came to a tiny clearing where a cloud tree log made an inviting seat in the shade, and Lila said, "No matter how far we walk, I'll have to go back to face it. Let's stop here and rest a while." He saw that the clearing was fairly well screened, but certainly not completely so. It would have to do. He sat down on the log several feet away from her, not wanting to take the chance of her getting hit by accident. Not that I'm enthusiastic about getting hit by intent myself, he thought. What a way for a Space Guard officer to die. He wondered if Rochford would ever inform headquarters that Lieutenant Dale Hunter had died in the line of duty. By whatever twisted logic this insane episode could be called duty. And he wondered how the commemoration roll would read for him. Displaying courage above and beyond the call of duty, Lieutenant Hunter sat conspicuously on top of a hill and calmly waited for 10 assassins to slaughter him. "It's peaceful and quiet here, isn't it?" Lila said. He had been trying to watch 4 different directions at once, and he realized that the constant swiveling of his neck was causing his stiff blouse collar to slowly cut his throat. And he saw that it was, for the moment anyway, peaceful and quiet where they sat. The sun was warm and golden before them, bright flowers sweetly scented the air, and giant rainbow moths were fluttering over them, their tiny voices like the piping of 1,000 fairy flutes. "I wish I had been born a country girl," Lila said. "I'd like to have a life like this, and not what mine will be." He asked the question to which he had to have the answer. "Once you were going to marry Val and live on Jardine, weren't you?" So my foolishness is no longer a secret?" "Foolishness?" he asked. "We met 2 years ago when I was attending the Fine Arts University on Jardine. I was younger and a lot more naive than I am now. I thought we were desperately in love and would get married as soon as I finished school and would live happily ever after and all that. And it didn't turn out that way. I had to make that promise to Daddy, and when I wrote to Val about it, he seemed to approve. He didn't suggest I renounce the proxy marriage when the time was up or anything. He just wrote that I knew what I wanted to do. He seemed relieved to be free to go ahead with his political career." "I see," he said, and then, "You don't feel bad about it, do you, Lila?" "Feel bad? I wouldn't marry Val Boren if he was the last man on Vesta. Even Lord Narf isn't as self-centered as he is." "You don't have to marry Narf either," he said. "You know that." She looked down at the ground and said in a dead voice, "I made a promise." "Rochford told me that your father never really knew Narf, that on the few times they met, Narf put on the act of being a refined gentleman, very respectful toward the king's daughter." She did not answer, and he said, "Is that the way it was?" "Yes, that's the way it was. But how could I tell Daddy as he lay dying?" "You couldn't, Lila. But if your father could be here today and know what you know about Narf, do you think he would want you to marry him?" "No, I guess not. But Lord Narf loves me in his own way, I think, and that's more than anyone else does." Then her tone changed, and she said, "I'm so glad that you're here today, Dale. I'm glad that there is someone who cares at least a little about what happens to me." On her face was a poignant longing for someone to love and comfort her. It seemed to him, now beyond any doubt, that there could never be anything for him in his career but loneliness. How different the warm love of Lila would be from the cold austerity of the military and its endless succession of weapons and killing. He moved to sit beside her and put his arm around her shoulders. "Lila," he said, "I want to tell you—"
"Dale."
The word was a despairing sob as her composure broke, and she held tightly to him, crying, her voice coming muffled as she pressed her face against his chest.
"Help me, Dale. How can I marry that sadistic beast when it's someone else I can't live without, and he doesn't even know I love him?"
"But he does." He hugged her closer. "He does know, and he loves you even more than you love him."
"Are you sure?"
She raised a tear-stained face, hope like sunshine through clouds on it.
"Are you really sure Val loves me after all?"
"Val?" The revelation was like the stunning concussion shock of a blaster beam passing 2 inches overhead. His vision blurred, and there was a hideous roaring in his ears. She was still holding to him for comfort, and it seemed to him that was wrong. He should be clinging to her for support.
"Dale, what's the matter?"
"But I thought," he swallowed with difficulty, "I thought you meant that I was the—" Something struck the top of his head, this time for certain, the concussion shock of a blaster beam passing close above it. There was a vicious crack as the beam split the tree beyond, then a crash, an explosion of wood fragments as a second beam followed the first. He rolled from the log, taking Lila with him. The arrow bushes shielded them briefly, long enough for them to reach the temporary safety of a small swale.
"Dale!"
Her dark eyes were wide with puzzled surprise, and one small foot was bare from the loss of a sandal.
"Someone shot at us,"
he thought. So Narf got his pictures after all. "Lieutenant!" Alonso came running. "They are that way. Ord spit out to be sure to kill you." Alonso motioned with his nose, a movement that seemed to cover all the high ground beyond them. At least, the enemy was not between them and camp, not yet. A distant shout came, an order from Narf to his men. "All of you, down that ridge! Get between Hunter and the camp!"
"It's him!"
Her fingers gripped his arm.
"He wants them to kill you!"
They had fired from a distance too great for his own blaster. He could not defy them from where he now stood. "I'll have to try to get within range of them," he said. "I'll go back—"
"No!"
Her grip on his arm tightened.
"Don't leave me, Dale. Don't let him find me here."
He looked down the length of the swale. At its lower end the ghost tree forest began, dense and concealing, but all down the length of the swale the snare vines lay in thick, viciously barbed entanglements, overlying a bed of sharp rocks and boulders. She could never get to the safety of the ghost trees in time. Narf had his pictures now. What would he do to her in the insanity of his hatred and triumph when he reached her? "All right, Lila," he said. "I'll see that you get to the trees." There was a crashing of explosions, and debris leaped skyward behind them and along both sides of the swale. The firing continued, scattered but very effectively consistent, and he said as he drew his blaster, "I guess they don't want us to go away." He set the regulator of the blaster at lowest intensity so that the beam would not clip dangerous flying fragments from the boulders. The green tough vines disintegrated reluctantly while the precious minutes sped by, while the unhindered assassins would be hurrying to the point where the entire swale would be visible to them and under their fire. Alonso was following along near the top of the swale's side, ignoring the danger as he watched the progress of the enemy and reported it to Hunter. "Now they are halfway. Lieutenant, hurrying faster." They reached the lower end of the swale. The last of the vines disintegrated, and the ghost tree forest lay before them. He touched her cheek in farewell. "Get on to camp, as fast as you can run." The firing abruptly ceased as he spoke. There was an ominous silence. Alonso came running, his tone almost a yelp in its urgency. "They are over us, where they can see us. We got to get it out of here, Lieutenant. Orfer, quick!" "Lila!" It was the voice of Val, sharp with concern for her. He came running out of the ghost trees, all his cold impassiveness gone. "Are you hurt, honey? Are you hurt?" "You came for me," she whispered the words, her face radiant. Then she ran to meet him, her arms outstretched, crying, "Val! Oh, Val!" Their arms went around each other. Then the woods erupted as 10 blasters laid down a barrage to block any escape to camp. "I'll try to give you a chance to get through," Hunter said quickly. "Be ready for it when it comes." He ran toward the firing line, taking advantage of the concealment afforded by the first fringe of ghost trees. They should be almost within range of his own weapon now. Again, the firing abruptly ceased, as though by some signal. There came the furious raving of Narf. "It's that Boran she wants! Kill him too!" Sonig cursed with bitter rage. "Jardine is lost to Vadam if any witness escapes, and we'll all hang besides." There was a second of silence, and then Narf's command, "Kill the woman too!" There was a roar like thunder as the firing began. The ground trembled, and debris filled the air with flying fragments. Hunter, still running toward the enemy under cover of the trees, saw Val trying to get Lila to safety, and saw them both hurled to the ground as a tree exploded in front of them. They would never live to rise and run again. He saw Rockford's plan at last, and what his own duty would now have to be. He knew why Rockford had said of this day, "If you can live through it, you will have it made." And he had a cold feeling inside him that he was not going to have it made. He took a deep breath and ran toward the enemy, out of the concealment of the ghost trees and in the open where they could not fail to see him, his blaster firing a continuous beam that fell only a little short of the enemy, that showed them he would be close enough to kill them within seconds if he was not stopped. The fire concentrated upon him, giving Lila and Val their chance for escape. He ran through an inferno of crashing explosions, twisting and dodging on ground that trembled and heaved under his feet, while razor-sharp rock shrapnel filled the air with shrill, deadly screaming sounds. Something ripped through his shoulder to spin him around and send him rolling. He scrambled up, firing as he did so, and ran drunkenly on. Something struck the side of his head, and he went down again. He tried to rise and fell back, a blackness sweeping over him that he could not hold away despite his efforts to do so. It seemed to him that the firing had suddenly stopped, that in its place was the hoarse buzz of a police stun beam. It seemed he saw helicopters overhead, bearing the bright blue insignia of the Royal Guard, and then there was nothing but the blackness. There was a brief, dreamlike return to consciousness. He was in a Royal Guard helicopter, and Alonso was beside him, grinning and saying, "You be okay, I glad, and my Princess Lila, look at her now, Lieutenant." He saw Lila, her hand in Val's, and her face was glowing and beautiful in its new-found happiness. Then she was bending down, kissing him and saying, "Dale, Dale, how can we ever thank you for what you did?" When the blackness lifted the second time, he was lying, bandaged, on a cot in the meeting hall, and the voice of Rockford was saying, "Ready to go in just a minute." The hall was filled with members of the royal court who had come for the wedding. He saw the white robes of Church of Vesta dignitaries who had come to officiate at the wedding. Then he saw the 7 grim old men seated at the far end of the table. The Royal Council, with the judicial power to give even death sentences in crimes committed against royalty. Sonig, his face white and staring, was being half led, half carried away from them. Narf, in the grip of another guardsman, was standing before the council and saying in a tone both incredulous and sneering, "Is that my sentence?" "There is a qualification to it," one of the council said. "It seems only just, in view of your crime, that you be tortured until death." The rest of the words were lost as the blackness swept back. But before unconsciousness was complete, when all else in the hall was gone from him, he heard Narf's cry, an animal-like bawl of protest, raw and hoarse with anguish. "Ah, you coming out of it, my boy?" Rockford was standing over him. "They gave you a restoration shot on Vesta 48 hours ago. It will be wearing off in a minute, and your head will clear." He sat up, and the dizziness faded swiftly away. He saw that he was in the compartment of an interstellar ship, and he knew that it was earthbound, and that Vesta and brown-eyed Lila were now part of the past. "Don't look so sad, my boy," Rockford said. "You'll get due credit and promotion for the invaluable part you played in my plan." "But—" "I know, but she was never yours. You'll find life is full of heartbreaks like that, son." "And we accomplished our mission. Narf's crime neatly invalidated the proxy marriage. Then Lila set a new precedent by marrying Val that very day. Earth has never had two such loyal and grateful friends as Val and Lila." "You knew all about them, didn't you?" he asked. "Strategic Service has to know everything, and I knew they were still in love even though each was too proud to admit it. That's why I had to insist on Val coming to Vesta. After that, it was only a matter of using you to awaken Val to the fact that she did not love Narf, and of taking care of various little details, such as faking an official request for the helicopters to come out 2 hours ahead of time, getting Val off to find her at the proper time, and so on." Rockford smiled at him. "And you learned that an old man's mind can be mightier than the space fleets of the Vadam Empire, and that the line of duty that produces the best results can sometimes be very devious." He thought of the white-faced Sonig and the anguished bawl he had heard from Narf. "I suppose they were going to hang Narf and Sonig at once." "The council would have, no doubt, but Lila was so happy that she begged the council to give them very light sentences, or just let them go free. So I suggested a compromise. The Royal Council regarded it as very fitting." "What was it?" "For Sonig, no punishment. The murder attempt, being news of public interest, will be broadcast upon Vesta and other worlds, including a factual, unbiased account of Sonig's participation in it. Shortly afterward, Sonig will be taken to Vadam and turned over to his own benevolent government. Vesta will file no charges." "But Sonig lost Jardine for his government. They'll execute him for that." "Yes, I'm afraid so. Shall we call it poetic justice?" "What about Narf?" "His sentence was lifelong exile on his Sea Island estate. He will be provided with all the luxuries to which he has been accustomed, including a full staff of servants. He will continue to enjoy all his possessions there, including his gallery of nude paintings, his risque films, his pornographic library, and so on. In fact, since he is so fascinated by pornography and such a collector thereof, any pornographic material which might become available on Vesta in the future will be sent to him." "That's not right. I mean, they were going to torture him to death." "Not to death. It was until death. There's a difference." "But that bawling noise he made—" "Ah, that was due to the one restrictive qualification to the benign terms of his exile. Every woman on his estate was to be removed before he reached there, leaving men servants only. Patrol boats will see to it that for so long as he lives, no woman shall ever set foot on the Sea Islands." Rockford smiled again. Lord Narf succeeded beyond his wildest dreams in keeping his boyhood vow of being always a man among men. The end. Subscribe for your daily stories of futures past. If you like this sort of human-read narration, please consider becoming a member of the channel. Members not only get rid of some of their unwanted money, but also may access the stories a whole week before everyone else. And that's it, really. Oh yes, the stories are and will remain AI free. And free of charge, of course.